The fox is out of the bag. Kasha. What happened? First, you have to suddenly leave for Rantle because of something happening there, and now? You've got tails and ears. Peter questioned as he gazed at aforementioned limbs with a worried gaze. Smacking my hand to my forehead, I sighed for a moment before looking up to my friends. Peter, to answer the question that you and Dine have about why I have tails and ears, it's because this is my actual appearance. The human appearance you see every day is just an illusion I cast to fit in. As for why I didn't have it cast when coming back, it's because I forgot since there was a lot on my mind when I was coming back here. Wait, Dine interrupted, you said the question that Peter and I have. Why not Lucrute and Nina? He then turned to said teammates and asked, did you two already know? Lucrute was the first to answer with a slight chuckle and blush. Kasha told me after she and I went off alone the first time. He answered. I figured out that she wasn't human, and she revealed it to me. It helped that we live together so it's easier to notice certain things. Nina replied. Peter sighed as he ran his hand through his hair in thought. When were you even planning to tell us, Kasha? He asked as he glanced at me. He looked neutral as he asked this, but I guessed that he may have felt slightly betrayed. I was planning to tell the pair of you soon. I just didn't exactly know how to broach the subject considering that, compared to Nina hiding her gender, I am literally not human. How would I even begin the conversation? I replied with my own question. Peter and Dine both seemed to think about my words with deep thought. Dine was actually the first to reply, I can understand the mentality behind your hesitation. You've probably seen a lot of the ways that non-humans can be treated during your travels. Dine's words managed to reach Peter as he began to consider them in his thought process. I gave the druid a wry smile as he said this. While I hadn't exactly experienced the way that non-humans were treated in this world, only heard of it, that was entirely different back in Yggdrasil. There, heteromorph players were continually bullied without rhyme or reason due to there being no consequences in doing so. And, while I hadn't fully experienced that until after I got my 9-tailed kitsune levels, it didn't change the fact that there was a stigma to it. Then, there were those times back on Earth as well. Walking up to my two friends, I put a hand on either of their shoulders. It wasn't my intention of hurting you both, I just didn't want to end up losing the good friends I've made since coming to this land due to something that was outside of my control. I guess you could say that I'm afraid of rejection. Peter rested a hand on my shoulder in return as his expression became one of acceptance. Kasha, you have to remember that you're one of us. I'll say it to you again and again until you let it stick into your head. We'd never abandon you just because you aren't human. Now, please, can you tell us everything that is going on? I smiled at my friends and nodded. I'll tell you, but we should probably sit down since there's a lot to go through. And hold your questions till afterwards, else we'll probably be at this all night. All right. Peter and Dine said while Lucrute and Nina gave a silent nod in agreement. From there, we all sat around the campfire once more and I began. As you already know, I'm not human. What I actually am is part of a race known as Kitsune, better known as magical foxes with multiple tails. They came into being when the goddess Inori granted her most faithful foxes a divine blessing of magic and intelligence, which also is what led to them having multiple tails. In addition to having created the Kitsune, Inori is also my mother. When I said this, Peter and Dine looked astonished. Before they could even ask anything, I stopped them. Like I said before, you two, hold your questions for afterwards. And from there, I told them of the main events that had occurred since my arrival here. How I'd created a giant stone tree at the Great Lake of Tob to impress the Green Claw tribe, the Magician's Guild discovery of said tree. Then I explained how Theo Ruksha partially figured out my identity before devoting his service to me. After that was the way that the Magician's Guild started a religion to worship me, or the Fox Princess as they called me. Ninia's forced consumption of my blood that led to my intervention and chiding of the Magician's Guild 2 days prior. And finally, It all led to my battle tonight at the Magician's Guild, where I defeated the Punishment Squad and Verona Margrost. After taking care of some matters at the end, my mind was too occupied and I forgot about putting my illusion up, leading to you guys finding out about my extra furry bits. I finished. Any questions? Peter was the first to speak up. There's a lot to sort through with this, Kasha. You're actually a goddess is one of the big things to comprehend. Actually, I'm a demigoddess. My mom is the goddess while my dad was just a normal human. It doesn't stop people from worshipping me as one, and I doubt that trying to explain the difference to those people at this point is going to do much to change that. So, I'm just running with it at this point. I answered with a little bit of a cheeky grin. Wait, you're part human? Lucrute asked with interest. Yes, though you could more consider it as what contributes to my mortality and mindset. The kitsune half, in combination with mom's divinity, breeds out the human side. You could more see me as a kitsune who just so happens to have a human parent. I answered. Yeah, Dad had an interesting time raising me considering the tail and ears I had. Dine then began to chuckle, making us all glance at him with questioning looks. Sorry. It's just that I now figured out why Lucrute stopped referring to you as his beautiful sorceress and started calling you his beautiful fox. Lucrute gave a bashful grin at this and I leaned into him while lightly wrapping a few tails around his side. Can't say that I'm complaining about it, I said with a laugh. Neither am I, my beautiful fox, Lucrute said back to me. Get a room you too, Peter joked before getting back on topic, continuing on from the whole divinity business. Your worshippers forced Nina to drink your blood. Peter then turned to look at my daughter after saying this. You're sure that you're okay with everything, Nina? Nina gave a smile and nodded enthusiastically. While it wasn't my choice, I wouldn't want to change it since I enjoy the connection I have with Kasha. The boost it gives to my magic is also a nice bonus. I patted my daughter on the head as she said this. I enjoy the enhanced connection we have as well, Nina. I added before looking to the others once more. Thankfully, I took care of it so that there won't ever be any repeats in the future. That's good to hear, Peter said with a nod, but, Kasha, you know that this conflict you have with the Church of the Four Great Gods isn't going to end with tonight. Once word about it spreads, they're probably going to send a lot more than just 4 of the Punishment Squad to deal with you. From what you said, you petrified the High Priestess of Rantel. There's bound to be consequences. I am very aware of that little issue. I'm not that worried since, from what I've seen of their best, they don't have a chance of being able to threaten me. As I've given my promise to protect Rantel, I'm going to make sure to follow through on making certain that Rantel is safe. I replied with confidence. It's very doubtful that the strongest members of the church were anywhere close to level 35. At most, they'd be in the high 20s to very low 30s. An army of kitsune would easily make mincemeat of them. Dine then spoke up with his usual thoughtful tone. I hope you're right about it, since Rantel is going to see an interesting few months regardless. With any luck, they won't be the bad kind of interesting, Peter said optimistically. Yet, tomorrow, everyone within Rantel's temple is going to be either freaking out or baying for blood. Then I'll have to take care to make sure that it doesn't happen. I didn't start this conflict, but I will make certain to end it if needed. A moment later, Lucrute wrapped his arm around my waist and asked, let's get away from the door conversation for a minute. I'm more interested in knowing how your goddess mother and your human dad ended up meeting. There's gotta be a story behind that. Is that really the thing that you want to know? I asked my silly archer directly, but the question also went out to the others as well. It's not every day you hear about how a mortal managed to become romantically entangled with a goddess. Dine admitted, excepting you and Lucrute, of course. He's not wrong, Kasha. Peter added with a smirk. Looking to Nina, she gave an enthusiastic nod. Of course, Nina would be highly interested in finding out. I never actually mentioned my dad to her and Tyre, and they hadn't asked due to all the other questions that the pair had. Okay, I'll tell you. I conceded before putting together an understandable story to the 4 compared to how my parents met on Earth. Years prior, my mom, Inori, had a tendency of walking among mortals in a human guise. It was during one of these excursions in a marketplace that my mom met my dad, Seth, when he was shopping for food. Dad saw Mom, who was disguised as a beggar at the time, and offered to her some food because she looked hungry. After feeding her, Dad asked if she had somewhere to stay for the night since it was the middle of winter and, was she a normal human, she'd freeze to death. After spending the night, Mom offered to repay him for the kindness that he showed her, which Dad tried to refuse, much to his failure. Mom left Dad's house after that. The next day, Dad found Mom at his front door with a bag of food in hand for him. In a way, I guess you could say that their entire relationship was built on these simple moments of kindness to one another until they just fell in love. It was after they ended up confessing to one another that Mom revealed her true form and identity to Dad. And Dad found her tails and ears made her look even more beautiful. While saying this, I looked at Lucrute with a grin before giving him a kiss. Then, I continued, after this, they got married. Then had me. While the basic gist of what I said was true, I left out a few things. Mom was disguised as a beggar because she was one. She lacked the power to do anything more than maintain her form and perform a few minor feats. Aside from that, she mostly looked like a regular person if her human guise wasn't up. It was during one of the harsh winters, where the toxic mixture of snow and pollution would rain down, as the weather went to the negatives and any without some method to keep warm would freeze to death. Those exposed to the snow would find it to be a deadly nightmare since it would burn your skin once melted and usually forced most of the cheap rebreathers to work overtime since it would clump into the openings and melt in a way to start damaging the tech unlike rain. Anyone smart would stay off the streets and take shelter until the storm passed. Everyone else would have to figure out some other method to make it through the storm. At the time, Dad had been in one of the cheap markets buying up a small stockpile of food for the harsh week of snowfall that was expected along with a few extra blankets to keep warm. The apartments that most people lived in had a chance for the heating units to crap out, so it was always the better idea to keep things like blankets on hand. When Dad had found Mom, she was being mugged for the hooded chem cloak she had. Dad, ever the good Samaritan, stepped in and ran off the pair before Mom would have fought back. From there, he asked her if she was all right and was able to get home to shelter from the coming storm. She said no, and Dad made what he considered to be the best decision in his life. He offered Mom shelter from the storm, which Mom agreed to. Color Dad surprised when, after making it to his home, he found the woman he rescued to be the white-haired and silver-eyed beauty that was my mom. After that, it pretty much went the way that I had told the others. Mom and Dad kept on helping each other, attempting to repay this endless debt of gratitude to one another. When they fell in love, Mom revealed her true form to him and Dad found her tails and ears made her look even more beautiful. Even as a little girl, I always found that story to be absolutely romantic. It made me feel that much better about my tail and ears as I grew up, hoping that I'd meet someone who found them to be beautiful just as much as Dad did with Mom's. Mom and Dad always said that I'd find someone who would like them. Now, I found that someone he liked all 9 of my tails along with my ears. There may have been that small twinge of doubt in the back of my mind about this. About how everything about this just seemed wrong, but I ignored it and intentionally tried to squash down this pesky and useless thought. Everything that I'm remembering is the truth. None of it's wrong. I don't need these doubts clouding my mind. Yeah, I really don't need these stupid doubts confusing me. So, I'll just forcibly ignore them until they finally just disappear. No wonder you were so happy when I said that to you. It was just like when your parents fell in love. Lucrute remarked, making me feel a mixture of nostalgia and happiness while my tails wagged in turn. It really was. You made a dream of mine come true since I was a little girl. I was happy to note that if there were any doubts in the back of my mind about this, then they had been thoroughly crushed before I could even notice them. That's very touching to see. Nenia commented. It truly is, kiddo, I said back. Since we know how your parents met, do you have any other family or is that just it? Peter asked curiously. I had 2 sisters. Sadly, both died years ago in addition to my dad. So, my only blood relative still alive is my mom. I answered. That seemed to sour the mood of everyone after hearing me so casually admit this. To be honest, Mom always did tell me that I had a pair of half-sisters out in the world when I was a kid. It wasn't until years later when playing Yggdrasil that I finally met them in the game. They had also acquired the Daughter of Inori class like I did. It was such an amazing coincidence. I was so happy to meet and talk to my sisters whenever I played the game. We got close enough that we didn't even use each other's game names and instead called each other by our actual names. My eldest sister's name was Mariko while my second eldest sister's name was Yumi. I was so happy to know that I had 2 big sisters that really cared about me. It's why I took it really hard when Mariko stopped logging in after a while. Yumi told me that Mariko ended up dying after being shot for her money and rebreather while walking down the street. A while later, Yumi was repeatedly killed by a guild of assholes during a guild war until she quit. I went on a one-woman war against their entire guild until they broke apart. I think that a world item might have been involved, but I'm not sure. What I do know is that I avenged her in-game. Sadly, the same couldn't be said about what happened to her in real life. Apparently, some scientists found out about her 2 tails and ears and tried to capture her. From there, it was all over the news with Yumi's corpse strapped to a gurney and paraded about as a subhuman creature that had been discovered hiding in a cave system of Japan. Unfortunately, she had died during the attempted capture, but they planned to study her body for science. That night, I curled up into my bed with my Meepo fox and cried myself to sleep, just like I had after Mom faded away and after Dad had died. I still miss my big sisters. But I now have the family that I found for myself. I have my 2 amazing daughters, my mate Lucrute, and my 2 friends Peter and Dine. And likely in a few short years, I'll have a few more kids to call my own. Sorry for bringing up bad memories, Peter said with regret. It's all right, Peter, you didn't know. I've had years to get over it. And besides, I pretty much see you guys as my family, so I've gained more people in my life right now than I've lost, I said to reassure our team leader. What I said did put a smile on everyone's face before Lucrute chimed in. If you see us all as family, I really hope that you don't see me as a sibling. Otherwise, that might make things a little awkward. We all took a moment to process my silly archer's words before bursting out into laughter at it. Way to go ending the moment, dummy, I joked with a grin. Lucrute smiled and kissed me back, something which we both began to really get into until Peter loudly coughed. When we broke apart and looked over to him, we could see the look of exasperation on his face. Can the pair of you get a room or something? At this point, I doubt that we're going to get anything further from you, Kasha, with the way that the pair of you compete in trying to eat each other's face, Peter said, making Lucrute and I laugh before standing up together. Okay, we'll table this conversation for later, I stated. Right. Just another one of the enthusiastic walks that the pair of you love to take together every night, Dine teased. We're just trying to remain physically fit, Lucrute answered. Is that what they're calling it now? Dine retorted with a cheeky grin. Guess so, I said as I pulled Lucrute away quickly. While doing so, both Lucrute and I began laughing as we half-walked/half ran towards the copse that we made our nightly spot when we were out here. Upon entering the tiny tree line, Lucrute asked, Kasha, you've said a lot about this embarrassing outfit of yours that you've worn when in your goddess persona. Since you've done so, I'm very curious on what it looks like. I rolled my eyes at my mate's question and might have said no if Lucrute hadn't decided to kiss me passionately enough that the pair of us were out of breath by the time we separated, making me a little hot and bothered. Please? At that point I sighed and nodded. Fine. But if I do this, you are not allowed to laugh, I relented before backing away from Lucrute and re-equipping to the divine stripper outfit. With the hat slightly obscuring my vision, I had to move my head up slightly so that Lucrute's eyes could meet mine. Holding my arms out and giving a playful twirl until I met Lucrute's gaze once more, I put my hands on my hips and gave my mate a smirk. "What do you think?" I asked. Lucrute's eyes wandered on my form before returning back to mine. Then he gave me a lewd grin. "If I wasn't a believer in my foxy goddess religion before, consider me converted right now," he answered. In response, I gave him a coquettish gaze before sauntering over to him with a sway in my step. "Oh, if that's the case, then this goddess has a very important mission for her most devout worshipper. Shall you accept this goddess' most holy request?" I asked with a sultry divine tone as I put a finger under Lucrute's chin. Lucrute, playing along in response, answered, "This goddess' most humble servant is ready and willing to accept anything she might ask of him." The grin he gave me was infectious, but I tried to maintain a straight face. This goddess is quite pleased to hear such a response from her worshipper. As a playful reward, I kissed his lips through my veil before pulling away. As for her request, the fox princess is in need of a steed tonight with quite a bit of endurance. Do you think that is something which her devout worshipper can provide? That is something completely within this humble servant's power. Then, this goddess shall begin the process of riding her valiant steed. Saying this, I used one of my tails to gently push Lucrute onto his back and began. The pair of us were sweating and breathing hard after our attempts to remain physically fit. My eyes met Lucrute's loving gaze as he studied at me with a satisfied smile, one that I matched. Gently, Lucrute pulled my veil aside and fully kissed me on the lips until we finally separated. Was this humble servant able to satisfy his beautiful goddess? Lucrute asked while pushing a strand of my hair behind my ear. Yeah, this goddess was extremely satisfied. You did admirably as my mount, Lucrute, I answered as I rested my head against his chest. Happy to see that I'm still able to please my beautiful fox, he stated before adding, though, we might need to fully separate soon if we don't want to risk becoming parents. I grinned at him. Give it a little bit. This is very comfortable and I doubt I could even move at the moment, I replied as I snuggled into his body with a soft sigh. How could I ever deny my beautiful fox her wish? My mate questioned, making me giggle as I soon rested my eyes after this. My one solace about the divine stripper outfit was that at least Lucrute liked it, though he'd probably think that I'd look amazing wearing a burlap sack. That's another thing that I loved about him. A few minutes later, and I clocked out for the night with a smile on my face. Nero. Day 23. As Yamato and I walked through the forest this morning, I noticed an amazing change in comparison to all the previous days before. I could actually see parts of the sky through the tree branches. It meant that we were starting to leave the heavy center of the forest and were starting to reach an edge of it. Hey, Yamato. How long do you think it'll be until we arrive at the lake? I asked. The gray fox looked over his shoulder at me with a neutral expression. I don't know if it was due to me spending enough time around him or if it was due to Yamato being a magical fox, but I was starting to get a feel on the minute expressions that he tended to make. Right now, he was feeling a bit annoyed at my question. Likely within the day so that you stop asking such an inane question, Yamato replied, making me roll my eyes at his usual gruff response. At least we're almost finished with this walking. I'm starting to get a little sick of this constant forest scenery, I remarked before deciding to ask, so, you mentioned that there's this giant tree that Inori's daughter, Kasha, created which is on the lake. Is there anything else there or is that just it? Aside from the tree that the princess has created, there are also the bridges along with the golden palace which she crafted afterwards. Other spots of note at the Great Lake of Tob would be the 4, once 5, tribes of lizardmen that inhabit the lake. Yamato answered, making me curious. What happened to the 5th lizardman tribe? I asked. Yamato actually smirked at this question. Either because he found it amusing or it had something to do with the answer. The princess has the admirable habit of gathering more allies under her banner of protection. Of which, the Green Claw tribe took up her offer to live in a settlement to the west of the city of Rantel. And she does this type of thing a lot? Yes. And she will likely continue to do so the longer she stays here. I hope that the princess is able to accomplish whatever form of end goal it is that she is trying to reach. Yamato finished with a tone of slight reverence. Guess that my taskmaster of a teacher has a real soft spot for this woman. Oh, I really had to wonder why she chose to make this settlement in the Riastais. From what I've heard from any of the gossip that spread around, back home, the kingdom was going to be conquered by the emperor and his army soon enough. What made Kasha want to build her settlement in the Riastais? Wouldn't it have been better to make it in the great forest of Tob or within the empire? I asked, voicing this question of mine. The Riastais was the land that she first arrived at. From there, she chose to lay her roots near Rantel due to connecting to the city's inhabitants. It also helps that a religion based around the princess has sprouted up within the city, with its membership growing daily. That sounds reasonable enough. And Kasha has no worries that Rantel is the first city that the Empire will reach once they finally win? This question actually got a surprising chuckle from Yamato. Nero, do you really think that your entire empire has even the pittance of power needed for the princess to glance in their direction, let alone be worried about them? She would not even need to meet them on the field of battle, as she could send a small contingent of her loyal servants to deal with whatever army that the Baharuth could possibly field, Yamato said with absolute certainty. And that made me wonder, just how powerful were the Kitsune if they could take on the might of the entire empire without Inori's daughter, Kasha, getting involved? I know that Yamato is extremely strong, considering how he can toy with me like an infant while handicapping himself to use only one tail during our fights. But how many people could he take on at once before getting overwhelmed, if he could get overwhelmed in the first place? To be honest, Yamato, I wouldn't know. Just comprehending that kind of power is a little beyond me. It's already hard to imagine an army bigger than 100 people or so. And apparently thousands get sent to the Katsa Plains every year. It's just a bit much to think about, I admitted. The Grey Fox thought on this for a few moments before asking, consider it my simple curiosity, but what did your people think about the continued war that your empire engages in every year against the Riastais? There were a lot of differing opinions about it. Some people thought it was our patriotic duty to aid the empire in fighting against her enemies. Others felt that it was just a waste of resources. Then there were some that only saw it as a lottery, with anyone called to the front being one of the unlucky chosen. And what do you think of it? It's the stupid war that took my dad, I replied bitterly. Yamato nodded at this, his curiosity now fully sated. I see. I am sorry for bringing up unpleasant memories. The fox apologized, which I waved off. You didn't know. Besides, I had a lot of time to deal with it, I responded, thinking onto that dull ache which first came with a courier arriving to our village to announce the casualties in battle. When Dad's name came up, Mom wailed the hardest among us. Grandpa spent a long time trying to console her. I think the worst part of the annual war is that bodies are rarely ever brought back from the front lines unless it's someone of high importance or nobility. The rest of the bodies are burned and destroyed as best they can be to prevent the corpses from coming back. From what I heard, the families at the start of this war were the luckiest since they had the highest chance of a body being returned. But after a little time passed, those dead bodies began to start resurrecting into the undead mid-transit. Following this, the policy to destroy any corpses was enacted. By now, Dad's bones and ashes had probably been trampled underfoot into the mud by all the later armies. Something that had happened to countless other fathers and sons during this war. Even if you do not yet have the skill, I can see that you have the mentality of a warrior to continue on from the harsh misfortunes of life. It is a commendable trait of yours that you would do well to retain in your life. I was stunned to hear an extremely rare compliment come from the Grey Fox's mouth. Thanks, I replied, and the pair of us were silent for a little longer until I decided to ask, hey, Yamato. On the mention of family, do you have any? Yamato was silent for a short moment in contemplation. When he finally came to a decision on what to say, he spoke. The only family I have left is my idiot of a little brother. Other than him, neither of our parents roam the realms of the living, nor have I a mate or kits. Sounds pretty lonely. I remarked. It is the hand that life dealt me. While I cannot control the events that happened, I can control how I react in accordance to them. Yamato answered in a resolute tone before he turned his head to me and finished with, "But that is enough discussion about such trivial matters. We must focus on the task at hand." "Right. Always business with you, isn't it?" I asked aloud. That question was one that Yamato didn't even deign to give a response to. Pluton Einsack. It was pure pandemonium as I made my way to the Adventurers Guild this morning. At first, it was the random person or two running up and down the streets, followed by a large amount of frenzied discussions that happened around me. But as I got closer to the district containing the guilds and businesses, I found it harder and harder to make my way through as a crowd grew in the streets and became denser the further I went in. At the same time, the conversations grew louder and I was able to pick up bits and pieces that I overheard. Guild was attacked by the church. Goddess called the Fox Princess fought. Verona Margros got petrified in front of the magicians. Goddess resurrected the dead. On and on, these conversations streamed past my ears, and I was only able to get a basic understanding of what happened. None of which managed to fully explain the events that transpired since last night. What I did understand is that the Magicians' Guild was attacked by the punishment squad of the church led by Verona Margrost. Some people died in the assault until the Fox Princess of all people stopped the attackers. Then, Verona was turned into a statue and the Fox Princess resurrected those killed in the assault. All of this was immensely worrying, and I knew that I had to get to the Magicians' Guild quickly to sort this out as multiple gold and platinum plate adventurers had been given the job of guarding the guild from assault. People who I was responsible for as their guild master. By the gods, this was turning out to be a troublesome day. It took some effort, along with a bit of shoving while also throwing my authority around, to make it through the crowd and arrive at the front steps of the guild where I couldn't stop my eyes from widening in shock. By the gods! I muttered to myself as I gazed upon the small plaza in front of the guild's building. All around, I could see the signs of battle from the scorch marks against the stone floor that a few mages were doing their best to remove, the dried bloodstains that a mage was using a water spell to clean away, and the cracked ground or broken wall of the guild building that some more mages were using earth or transmutation spells to fill in and smooth away the damage. Yet, the main attraction was the stone statue raised upon a pedestal that faced towards the crowd. The statue was Verona Margrost, who stood frozen with a look of terror upon her face as she gazed up to the sky, looking for some salvation that wasn't there. I knew in an instant that this truly was the High Priestess of the Rantals Temple. The statue was too lifelike and imperfectly perfect as only a once-living being could be. It was both horrifying to look at, yet also impossible to look away from. Underneath the statue, carved into the pedestal the Verona stood on, were words: "Here stands Verona Margrost, High Priestess of the Church of the Four Great Gods. This monster is responsible for ordering the murders of many innocent men, women, and children. Let her punishment stand as testament to her crimes, as is dictated by the Fox Princess." It was chilling to read those words. While I am aware that the Church is not the good and pure organization that they claim to be, it's hard to hear that Verona Margrost, the kindly High Priestess, was able to order the deaths of innocent people. At the same time, I couldn't exactly find it within myself to refute the words of a goddess when she states exactly why she had punished someone. It has to be a sick joke. How could High Priestess Verona ever be guilty of such a thing? A man asked. It has to be some prank these mages have conjured. Did you even see her at the temple today? Another responded in turn. Why hasn't anyone done something yet? She can't just be left there. A woman asked. They can't. Heard that a bunch of priests and clerics came over to break her curse and were unable to. Couldn't even pull her from the ground since she's merged with it. A female adventurer answered. Hanging from her neck was a silver plate, and putting her face to name, I recalled it was Sansa Umhart. We should storm the guild and demand that these practitioners of dark magic fix this. A zealous man stated, to which Sansa scoffed. You and what army? They're mages, so they could likely mow down a large portion of any group mustered against them, if not all of them, with their spells. And that's without bringing the Fox Princess into the mix. She's definitely real and is willing to retaliate on any who try attacking her people. Sansa explained before adding, and besides, she brought back a few adventurer friends of mine who the church thugs murdered last night. So, she obviously ain't all bad. She can resurrect the dead? Yeah, everyone saw it, including some of the city guard. Shaking my head, I began making my way up the steps towards the guild. I saw how none of the mages stopped me as all of them gave me a knowing nod. Seems like Evelyn let the mages know of my unofficial alliance that I made with her. Even so, I thought about what they said on how the Fox Princess brought people back from the dead, my people. I was both thankful as well as curious as to what she did to resurrect my fellow guildmates. During the talks that Theo and I have had over the years on multiple different subjects, my friend has brought up the subject of reviving the dead a few times. From what I know, one of the methods to do so involved a powerful spell of the 5th tier that could bring back the fallen if the body was in a good enough condition. But the knowledge and skill to do so was beyond any normal mage, and that didn't even take into account that there was some sort of cost behind the spell. From the records Theo had, such a spell would heavily weaken the newly revived for quite some time after. And it seemed like that wasn't the case with whatever the Fox Princess did, since otherwise the gossipers outside would also be speaking of it. Approaching the front desk where a man in a dark robe stood as a secretary, I asked, "Could you possibly tell me where Evelyn might be?" "She'll be in her office currently." "Will you need aid in getting there?" the young man asked, to which I shook my head. "I remember the route from last time." "Thanks for your aid," I answered. "You're welcome, Guildmaster Einsack." With this, I walked away and made my way up the central staircase and down the hallway to Evelyn's office, all the while thinking on what chaos was likely to occur after last night's events. Already, I can imagine that the church was running about like headless chickens as they rushed to fill in Verona's current vacancy. From there, the Magicians' Guild was going to be receiving a large influx of visitors. Either from curious passers-by, vengeful followers of the 4 great gods, potential converts, and political entities. I don't typically use the term lightly. But this was going to be a clusterfuck of the most epic proportions. Arriving at the entrance of Evelyn's office, I knocked on the dark wooden door and heard the voice of said woman say, "Come on in." Twisting the brass handle on opening the door, I found Evelyn sitting at her table furiously filling out documents before she stopped and looked up to me. The strange conical hat of hers was hanging off the back of her chair while her red hair was held back in a bun. I took note that her eyes, while slightly tired, held an excited look within them. Even so, the obvious signs of lack of sleep did not take away from the hospitable look she gave with a smile slightly obscured by her veil. "Good morning, Pluton. I've no doubt that you have question about the events of last night." She then gestured to a chair in front of the table. I gave a nod in answer as I closed the door behind me and joined Evelyn at the table. I'd been hearing all sorts of things from the gossip outside, but I felt it better to get to the truth of the matter from a more reliable source. "As is your right to know. It was members of your guild who got killed last night after all, even if it was only temporary," Evelyn said in agreement. "Last night, Verona Margrost and a team of the church's punishment squad came to the guild in order to slaughter all of us. At the start of the attack, 5 adventurers fell, 4 dead and 1 critically injured. By that time, I and the adventurers still inside went out to aid in the fighting. It was when one of the executors, a pyromancer, was about to send a wave of fire at us that one of my lady's servants, a fox with 4 tails known as a kitsune, blocked the spell with a shield of water. From there, the kitsune and I had the adventurers retreat inside and inform the rest of the guild." As I watched Evelyn say this, the golden rings in her eyes seemed to glow brighter in recollecting the moment. "My lady's servant and I fought together, but after the other maidens tried to join us, the kitsune had us retreat inside to safety so that she could deal with the threat herself. Unfortunately, one of the executors was able to get inside after breaking a portion of the wall down, and might have killed us maidens if not for the timely intervention of the Fox Princess. From there, she broke the limbs of the intruder before blasting him out of the guild and following afterwards. We remained back as my lady easily defeated all of the executors. When we went outside, followed by the rest of the worshippers and your adventurers, we found the Fox Princess having healed the critically injured adventurer outside, Verona Margrost petrified, and the executors either dead or incapacitated. After that, she resurrected those 4 adventurers who had fallen while also giving her followers a new tome of magic on healing. She wished for us to use the knowledge we gained to help others. Once done, she declared the city to be under her protection before she took the executors and left. And do you have any idea what she plans to do after having made this declaration? Because there's a lot unknowns right now and we are likely to be smack dab in the middle of it. I asked as I considered the ramifications of the Fox Princess having fully announced her presence. If there were people who doubted her existence before, they could look right outside the Magician's Guild to see the proof with their own eyes. Unfortunately, Evelyn gave me a shrug. The plans and ideas of the goddess is beyond the scope that us mortals could comprehend. She could be ensuring this city's safety, declaring her ownership of it, or even be using this as a stepping stone to fully rule the Riastais. It is not something I plan to question, as I know that any decision that she makes will result in trying to help as many people as possible. I couldn't help but sigh at the answer. All I got from Evelyn's answer was a non-answer that I've received from priests and priestesses before. Taking a breath to recompose myself, I spoke once again. Even if you can't predict your goddess' long-term plans, if you had to make any guess on what she might do next, what would you think it might be? The Fox Princess wishes us to learn healing magic in the aid of others. Likely, she might even walk among us to do so herself. It would certainly help in garnering more goodwill and faith among the people of Erantle. Other than that, I have no idea. Evelyn replied, making me feel slightly better that this goddess priestess had an inkling of future events. Hopefully, she does it soon, since the city is going to be like dry tinder waiting to be lit. All it would take is one little spark to set it off. And if I had to guess the ones to light it, then it'd likely be the priests and priestesses in this city's temple of the 4 great gods. Based on the reaction of the crowd outside, this tension was already brewing up. Evelyn smirked at my musings. Worry not, Pluton. My lady made her declaration of protection for not just external threats, but internal as well. I maintain my faith in whatever may happen next, but I'm not completely slothful as to let my goddess do everything herself when I have my own capabilities to aid her. Upon saying this, she collected a few documents of parchment and handed them over to me. Curiously, I took the offered parchment and quickly began to read it, then I realized exactly what these documents were. These are orders for healing potions from multiple different pharmacists and alchemists across the city. What do you need all of these potions for? Evelyn gave me a kind smile as she answered, it will take some time to have enough mages trained in the healing arts my lady had gifted us, but that does not mean that we are without any method to fulfill her wishes. All around the city are manufacturers of healing potions. For most people, especially peasants, a healing potion is something that they'd never see, much less afford, in their lifetime. And paying the church's fees may also be beyond what they could pay. So, why not perform a little altruism while also gaining the hearts and minds of the people in turn? We'll be giving free healing potions to those in desperate need. The idea certainly had merit to it. Receiving free healing was almost never heard of, and any parent whose child was sick or injured would be extremely thankful to anyone that managed to save their child. But still, the amount of gold it would take to afford all of these potions is astronomical. How would you possibly be able to afford it? From the document details, it seemed that Evelyn was putting in an order of over 1,500 healing potions. Just on average, that's 1,500 gold for the entire lot of potions, which doesn't account for changing variables like differing prices and stronger or weaker potions used. It was a fortune. While the Magician's Guild does have funding issues from the kingdom, that does not mean that we flounder under such a handicap, only that we find new avenues with which to make funds. While it's unknown to me as to how other branches attain their money, the Magicians Guild in Rantel has a nest egg of sorts containing 1,549 bronze coins, 965 silver coins, 687 gold coins, 67 platinum coins, 5 mithril coins, and 13 gemstones worth 100 gold each. I couldn't help but feel amazed at that amount, while also wondering as to why the Magicians Guild might have so much issue with funding while owning such a hoard. That nest egg is ridiculous. How is it that you possibly have money issues when you own easily more than 2,000 gold coins? I asked. This nest egg has been added onto since the Magicians Guild was first founded. We have kept it secret, both due to the nest egg being for dire emergencies of extreme need, and because of what might happen should the Re-Esti's government or nobles discover how much wealth we've squirreled away for safekeeping. And I nodded in agreement at Evelyn's words. If that hoard was discovered, then the nobles would try everything to tax and drain such wealth until not a copper was left. Additionally, Evelyn added, it's quite difficult to convert such wealth in a short time frame without raising suspicions. Thankfully, Lady Annabella was quite amenable in agreeing to buy a lot of our funds from us. She also helped in getting a few prices on these potions lowered for us since we're buying in bulk. I smirked at Evelyn's resourcefulness in the matter. You were able to get all of this accomplished since last night? I asked. Ignoring sleep, I was. The redhead admitted, I had couriers running throughout the city all of last night and this morning to accomplish this. By the end of today, the Magicians Guild will be a few thousand gold poorer, but will have recouped that by attaining the hearts and minds of the people. I think it's a good trade. At least there's a plan in motion. I've no doubt that Baron Argost will be thrilled to hear of what happened and of what you have in store. I remarked. Indeed. Lord Argost along with Lord and Lady Raylands will be extremely valuable in tiding over the nobility. How have things been going on your end? Evelyn asked. Oh, talk of the Fox Princess has spread around the guild like wildfire. News and information about her will be everywhere within 2 to 3 months. After that, it'll be out of my hands. I answered. Excellent. Not much to do now other than act and react in turn. Yuriko, the guardian shadow. I couldn't help but smirk as I listened in on the two humans as they discussed their plan to aid the princess. It was quite sound and well reasoned with only a small chance of failure. From my years of living, I've learned that it's better to utilize simple plans compared to overarching grand schemes due to smaller chance of failure. Whereas with highly complicated schemes, one small thing out of place or an unforeseen factor could cause such a plan to break into pieces. The plan of Evelyn and Pluton was as simple as they come. Spread word of the princess across this realm while also increasing her standing among the people in this city. There came a layered use to each individual plan that easily formed together into a valuable whole. Pluton's adventurers would spread out the initial word of my lady which, while hard to believe at first, would then be enhanced once the second wave of news came of the princess's and her followers' charitable acts within the city. From there, the news would spread itself. Even if some rumors might verge upon the absurd, it still put the princess into the mind's eye of the public. And with deities like Lady Inori and her daughter, the beliefs and thoughts of mortals was quite valuable. The princess will become the prime goddess of this world, with Lady Inori following in turn as belief in her daughter would transfer as belief into her. While I may not be one of the lucky few to have received visions or orders from Lady Inori, Peremu was. From what we've been told by him, Our Lady is impatiently giddy and excited to eventually be able to physically interact with her daughter. As such, she wants absolutely nothing to get in the way of such an event. And as it is the wish of Our Lady, it becomes our wish as well. And even aside from meeting the princess, Lady Inori wants to finally meet her granddaughters and the princess's mate. While I have nothing against humans, something about that man just smelled wrong to me, and I have no way to truly describe it. But be that as it may, it is above my station to tell the princess about who she should take as her consort or not. My only place is to protect the princess and her family and help to ensure Lady Inori's successful manifestation in this realm. From there, Lady Inori would help groom her daughter to be the perfect ruler of this realm. And after that? I am unsure, but I eagerly wait to find out. Yet, to get there, we, the dutiful servants of Lady Inori and Princess Kasha, must help to pave the path for them. To do so, I would send a message to the princess and inform her of an optimal path for her to take. Once that was complete, I would spread word among the others and let them plan accordingly. Kasha. After waking up from another fun night and getting ready for the day with Lucrute, I found myself being contacted by a message. Upon answering it, the kitsune, Yuriko, who I left to watch the Magician's Guild, answered, "Princess, while watching the humans at the guild, I heard of an interesting way to enamor the people of Rantel to you. The best method would be to go about the city and personally heal the afflicted. This would also have the side benefit of potentially lowering the tension within the city due to your justified actions of last night. Sounds interesting. I think I could make some time a little later to do so. How are things within the city currently? Anything I should be worried about?" While there is the obvious tension as I have mentioned before, none of it has led to any violence at this point in time, but it isn't certain. It would be wise to take caution with your next actions. Thanks for letting me know. Continue as you were. I concluded while mulling over what I had been told. By your command. With that, Yuriko ended the message. While I considered what I was going to do with today, the best way would likely be to send my kitsune to scour the city for any in need of aid, then I'd likely also set up a large group to continually patrol Rantel and make sure that my city was safe and protected so that my worshippers can continue to pray in my name. And after enough people are offering their worship to me, I could get a few to worship Mom as well. Oh, it would be so exciting to see Mom again. We'd be reunited again and have so much to catch up on. I could even get to show off my 8 new tails I've acquired since she last saw me. The best thing would be if Mom called me her little fox again. But in order to do that, I needed to acquire more worship to become stronger and, in turn, make Mom stronger. After all, even if I was nervous and hesitant about everything at first, this religion business really all started because I wanted to be able to see Mom, and possibly Dad, again. Yeah. That would just be wonderful. Mom, Dad, and myself all together again. It's really what I've always dreamed of since I was a little girl. And now, that dream was starting to become a reality. This is what I've always wanted. This is Slashant, right? Ready to go, my beautiful fox? Lucrute asked, dragging me from my thoughts as I looked at my archer who had a large smile on his face that made me feel warm inside whenever he focused that smile upon me. Yeah, I'm ready to go, my silly archer. I replied as whatever I might have been thinking was quickly forgotten as I was helped to my feet. You know, there's one convenient thing about Peter and Dine knowing about my actual appearance. What might that be? Lucrute asked. That I don't need to keep my disguise up all the time now. I answered as a few of my tails slid around different areas of his body to aid in my response. While convenient, one thing I don't like about the disguise is how cramped it makes me feel after a while. In turn, Lucrute wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me closer to his side, making me laugh. Well, I'm glad that you don't have to deal with that issue as much anymore. This humble servant wouldn't want his beautiful goddess to feel uncomfortable now, would he? He huskily whispered into my ear as I suddenly became a little needy. If that's the case, then this goddess will require her humble servant to relieve her of a new issue that has just come up. I whispered back in my divine tone. Then I'll just have to fix that. But are you sure that we should make the others why I cut him off as I pulled him into a passionate kiss until we finally separate? We can hold off on training for 20 or 30 minutes, I said back while letting one of my tails cast silence on the area once again. Nero. Quite a bit of time had passed since Yamato and I had started traveling again today. Looking up through the tree canopy, I found that the sun was high in the sky, which told me that we had been going like this for the past 4 or 5 hours. Throughout all the time, Yamato remained his usual stoically quiet self while I had tried to continue making small talk, much to my continual failure. It seemed that the grey fox had used up most of his ability to communicate after talking to me this morning. But that didn't stop me from trying. It was at least better than just remaining quiet. What will we be doing once we arrive at the lake? I can only assume it might be something different. I asked. You do not need to know what your training might be. All you need to understand is that whatever I require of you to do is all in the goal of furthering you as a paladin of Lady Inori. Though, I do have one question for you. Cocking my head at the grey fox, I asked, what kind of question? Yamato gave me a hint of a grin. How well are you able to swim? He asked with a tone that felt a little malicious. I wouldn't really know. We didn't have any ponds or lakes nearby my village to swim in. I answered with a growing suspicion. Then it will be a good experience for you to learn. A warrior would not let something like a little water drown him. As Yamato said this, one of his tails wrapped around my waist and he took off charging through the trees while I found myself screaming as I looked at the fox like he'd gone insane. As another of his tails ripped my sword from my hand. A moment later and I found myself flying through the air after Yamato released his tail's grip from around my waist as my world seemed to be spinning. Then, I felt myself splash down into cold water as I felt myself begin sinking a bit into the water until I tried clawing my way towards the surface. Whatever it was that I did seemed to work as I grew closer and closer to the surface, yet I felt like I was moving too slow as the air ran out of my lungs. Just as I felt that I was doomed, Yamato's tail ripped me from the water and I found myself held above the lake while gasping for air. What the hell was that, you stupid fox? I demanded. You needed a bath since I have had to deal with your stench for days. Besides, you should not be complaining as we have finally arrived. That's when I actually took a moment to look at my surroundings. It was a massive lake with multiple bridges spanning across it which all led to a mountainous tree reaching high into the sky. Even with the annoyance that Yamato put me through, I couldn't help but smile at having finally arrived. There was once a village. Nero. Water dripped off me in a trail as Yamato and I made our way across the stone bridge together. It was one of a few of these bridges spanning the lake, all of which led to the centerpiece of the area. A golden palace in front of a massive tree of stone and vegetation. Honestly, when I was told the scale of the tree, it had been hard to picture. But now, I could feel the full weight of the divinely conjured tree that was almost the height of the Azalisia Mountains if not slightly larger. It filled me with a mixture of awe and dread. If Inori's daughter, Kasha, could conjure something like this, then what might happen if she decided to take on the might of an entire nation? It was something that was better left as a hypothetical since such an event could only lead to a one-sided slaughter. But even through that dread creeping within me, I also felt a measure of hope. Maybe I could convince Kasha to try and save what's left of my village along with my family, if there even was anything left. It's this little sliver of hope for Grandpa and a letter that let me continue on. Pulling my attention away from the giant tree, I noted the braziers lining the bridge that were filled with the blue fire I could conjure that Yamato told me was named Foxfire. It was a little entrancing to watch the blue flames dance in the bowls of the braziers since the fire almost seemed alive in a sense. Eventually though, I took my gaze off the flames, looked further along the bridge where a few foxes with multiple tails ran about. Interestingly enough, a lot of the ones I saw lacked the same number of tails that Yamato had. The highest I counted was 5 on a fox with blue fur. Yamato, why do you kitsune have differing amounts of tails? Does it mean anything? I asked. For my race, tails are earned through 3 different methods. We earn a tail after a century of living, reaching a new level of power which expresses itself through the growth of a tail, or through accomplishing great feats. When Yamato said this, I couldn't help the examining gaze I gave the grey fox. How old are you? I cautiously asked. I have lived for 361 years. 3 of my tails have been earned with my age, while the rest were from reaching new levels of power. Yamato answered with a stoic glance to me. What would be the highest number of tails that you could get? I remember that Inori had 10 tails, so that should be it, right? Yamato shook his head in disagreement. No, the highest number of tails that Kitsune can earn are 9. Attaining anything higher can only be accomplished by Lady Inori and her children. Even then, doing so requires attaining full godhood, something which only Princess Kasha has been the closest to succeeding. If that's the case, then how many Kitsune have gotten 9 tails? 67. Of that number, only 22 are still among the living. Yamato finished ominously. That was a bit worrying. I couldn't help but ask, why are only 22 still among the living? From what I've seen so far from just you with only 7 tails, it seems like it would be extremely hard for anything to kill more of your race if they had a larger number of tails than that. This earned me a sigh from Yamato. Back home in Yggdrasil, there are beings greater and more terrible than you could imagine. Wars between the realms are constant as the inhabitants of the realms vie for more territory. Not even gods are exempt from such desires. As such, many Kitsune lay down their lives in defense of the realm of foxes. Of which, a few casualties involved Kitsune with 9 tails. Thankfully, incursions into Lady Inori's realm have lessened because of alliances made between Lady Inori, Lady Freya, and Lord Loki due to their ties to Princess Kasha. Those new names made me cock my head in confusion. Who are Freya and Loki? And what ties do they have with Kasha to make them ally with Inori? To be honest, all this talk of politics really confused me. Maybe it had to do with my peasant upbringing, but wars, alliances, and all that stuff seemed like a lot of clutter. I get that wars happened because people wanted land and power, but anything further than that became a confusing mess. Why couldn't things just be as simple as pointing out a bad guy and then swinging a sword at it? Lady Freya is the goddess of fertility, beauty, war, gold, and future sight who helps to rule the realm of Valheim. Lord Loki is the god of mischief and trickery who resides within the realm of Jotunheim. Both deities have taken Princess Kasha as their disciple. As such, they have taken it upon themselves to aid her or her family if possible. That's kinda amazing. So, how many gods are there besides those 3? I mean, we have the 4 great gods along with the minor gods under them, but that's about it from what I know, I asked, wondering why it was only now that other gods were coming to this land? More than you can imagine. Surprisingly, Yamato then chuckled, Nero, none of the gods your people worship are real. That announcement made my jaw drop. The gods your people worship could be imagined as little more than oceans of power that your people pray to. There is no mind or soul to it, just a great emptiness. I quickly tried to interject, what about the priests, clerics, and paladins? How could any of them use their magic if the gods weren't real? They simply take buckets of power from that mindless source with sheer belief. It's not because their gods thought them faithful enough to be awarded power. If your gods were true deities, they would have manifested long ago and be walking among you. Then, Yamato's tail lightly smacked me upside the head, making me hiss in pain as I rubbed the hurt area. What was that for? I demanded with a glare. It is unbecoming for a paladin of Lady Inori to even care about other gods when you have specifically been blessed by her. Besides, unlike the rest of those worshippers, you have actually met Our Lady, Yamato stated with a dry look. Sadly, I couldn't even argue against his point. I guess so, I said in admittance. You know so. Yamato corrected, and just as it seemed that he was about to say more, we were interrupted when the blue kitsune with 5 tails that I saw earlier appeared before us. It seems that you've finally come back from your excursion, the blue kitsune said with a playful female voice. Then, her blue-eyed gaze took notice of me, and it seems that you came back with a human tag-along. Hello, Karin, Yamato said in an even drier tone than before. I couldn't tell if it was because the two had history with one another or if it's because of how outgoing that Karin seemed, which heavily chafed against Yamato's personality. Come on, Yami. Don't be like that. She taunted before she asked me, I hope that Mr. Personality over here didn't spend the entire time walking with you acting like a nearly mute companion? Glancing over to my annoyed teacher, I decided that I cared more about my life than speaking my opinion. I'd rather not answer that. That bad, huh? She said in sympathy. Well, let me inform you that most kitsune are not as dour and serious as Yami here. For instance, as Karin said this, her form became covered in soft white glow before it faded away to reveal a woman with short and spiky blue hair, a pair of blue-furred fox ears, and 5 similarly colored tails waving behind her. I'm a lot more fun to hang around with. Examining Karin, she wore a strange style of clothing that was quite similar to Inori's except for the blue coloring compared to her white, along with being a lot more revealing. It was quite easy to tell that she was developed with how open the front of her robe was. It just seemed to hang off the sides of her arm and chest, revealing all of the skin of her tanned shoulders and the top of her chest. Honestly, it was either a miracle or magic that her robe didn't slip down and make her a walking act of public indecency. Hilariously, she didn't seem as big as Inori, who didn't flaunt her looks. Additionally, the weird robed dress she wore ended at her lower thigh, while further down, her feet were covered in wooden sandals on strange tiny stilts, with the one at the heel rising further than the front. Focusing my eyes back to her beautiful face, she gave me a knowing grin and winked one of her blue-slitted eyes at me. I couldn't help but blush in embarrassment, making the tailed woman laugh. While I appreciate your complimentary looks, you're a little young for my tastes. Give it a decade or two and then we might be able to get somewhere. I found myself choking on my own spit as I started coughing into my hand. This only elicited further laughter from Karin, who gave me a playful pat on the shoulder. Just messing with you, kid. As for introductions, if you were listening to Grumpy earlier, my name's Karin. I'm one of the caretakers of the Fox Palace of Princess Kasha, along with glorified arborist of the Tree of the Gods. What might your name be? Karin said while holding out her hand, which I took note had a wicked set of sharp claws on each finger. After my coughing finally died down, I shook her hand with mine and spoke. Nero. My name's Nero. Pleasure to meet you, Nero. As she shook my hand, her eyes glanced to the marking on the skin of said hand. This was followed by her eyebrows raising in surprise. Lady Inori chose you to be her paladin. That is quite a surprise. Yeah, it was something I didn't expect as well. But here I am, I said with a shrug of my shoulders as we broke the handshake. Tends to be how life plays out in general. Karin remarked, so, kid, any reason why you look like you've been living in the jungle for a few years? I was forced to run into the forest after my village was attacked by demons. I answered as my mood instantly lowered upon thinking of the events that occurred. While Yamato already knew this and showed no change in expression, Karin was the exact opposite. Her eyes widened as her smile fell. Would you be able to tell me what kind of demons attacked your home? It surprised me how quickly her emotions seemed to change from playful to absolutely serious. I couldn't really put a name to them. I answered honestly. How about trying to describe them? Can you do that, Nero? There were a lot of different creatures. As I said this, my mind flashed back to that day when the multitude of demons killed and tortured my family, friends, and neighbors. But then, I perfectly recalled the horrid bastards with stingers that kept stabbing a letter and laughing. That just filled me with rage as my fingers squeezed against the hilt of my sword. I wanted to hack them all to pieces. But I tried to bury this anger a bit in order to answer Karin's question. The demons I can recall vividly as they tortured my little sister, Aletta, were these short creatures that looked like red-skinned infants with red eyes. They had bat-like wings, short horns, and thin tails with barbed stingers on the end. They used them to repeatedly stab Aletta and inject some kind of venom into her that paralyzed her. Little fuckers were laughing as they did so. I growled out. From your description, those creatures could only be imps. Exactly how long ago did this happen? Karin asked as her tail seemed to just freeze in place. 9 days ago. I answered, which seemed to pale her tan skin. That was when Yamato decided to speak up. What do the type of creatures and time have to do with anything, Karin? What do you know that I do not? While y'all were out roaming the woods, 2 days after Nero's village was attacked, 2 imps and a doppelganger tried to kidnap and replace the princess's eldest daughter. Yamato froze when Karin said this, as his fur slightly bristled. The fact that these creatures, which appeared in two places so soon after one another while not being native to the region, leads me to believe that they are being commanded by the same entity, Yamato said while finishing Karin's thought. The fact that they appeared in two different countries means that this intelligence that commands them is confident enough in attempting to spread its reach across multiple countries. Hearing Yamato say this was an uncomfortable thought. Just what kind of entity would try to kidnap the daughter of a demigoddess along with torturing or capturing the people of my village? We have to inform the princess of this immediately. The moment Karin said this, Yamato's tail picked me up by my waist before depositing me upon his back. Yamato quickly said, "We have to move quickly. Hold on." A second later and both Yamato and Karin were taking off across the bridge as everything became a blur. Another second and the three of us were at the steps to the palace. Karin pushed the doors open with her tails and we entered into a large throne room that held a tall jewel-encrusted throne elevated off the ground. Oddly enough, the throne was completely empty, with the 9 curved spikes on the throne looking like a hand grasping at the air. But while the throne was empty, the foot of the stairs leading up to said throne was abuzz with activity of kitsune that talked to a red-furred kitsune that had 4 tails. It seemed like they would receive orders from the fox before running off in different directions to complete the tasks they were given. That changed upon the arrival of Karin, Yamato, and myself as we drew near to the red kitsune. "Greetings, Karin, Yamato, and our new guest. Is there something wrong?" A soothing female voice spoke from the red fox. "Suki, we need you to send out a message to Princess Kasha." The red fox I now knew as Suki seemed to quickly glance at me when Kasha's name was said. I couldn't understand why, but it soon changed when she focused back on Karin. We might have information on a possible connection with whoever it was that attempted to kidnap her daughter. Karin quickly replied, making Suki freeze before she gave a nod. For a few moments, we watched her stand there, seemingly doing nothing, until she finally spoke once more. "I have informed the princess. She shall be here momentarily," Suki answered. It was momentary indeed, as a gold flash appeared next to the red kitsune and quickly died down to reveal a gorgeous blonde woman standing there. The first thing to note about her was the pair of long golden furred fox ears on top of her head along with 9 matching tails flowing behind her. Her eyes were a glowing gold, but unlike Karin's and Inori's, hers had rounded pupils unlike the slits they had. Another difference between her and them was her clothing style of an oddly cut and revealing black dress edged in gold alongside matching gloves and boots. But even with the differences in clothing, it was easy to tell that this woman was Inori's daughter due to how much they resembled one another. This was definitely Kasha Blanc, Inori's daughter. One side thought I had as my eyes glanced between Karin, Kasha, along with the mental image of Inori was how ridiculously attractive they were. I mean, Karin might not be as developed as the other 2 women were, but it was still a lot more than humans typically were. Does the humanoid form of every kitsune look like it came from a fairy tale, or were those 3 just the exception? By Inori, did that mean that Yamato was also able to outclass me in looks along with being able to kick my ass without effort? This kinda makes me feel a little self-conscious. "I came as soon as I could. What is it that you found out about Tyre's failed kidnappers? And also, who's the kid?" she asked while glancing at me in curiosity. Yamato was the one to actually answer this time. "This is Nero, Your Highness, who I have taken as my student under your mother's orders. He is the reason as to why we discovered this new information." As soon as Yamato mentioned Inori, Kasha's expression became one of shock while her golden eyes widened and she fixed her attention solely on me. "Mom wanted you to be taught." "Why?" she asked in confusion with a hint of desperation in her voice. Whereas before, she seemed to be this imposing and untouchable demigoddess, now Kasha appeared, in a silly way, so much more human. Sucking up the courage, I decided to answer the demigoddess. "Inori came to me in my dreams when I was at my lowest point after my village was destroyed. She wanted to help me, so Inori made me her paladin." Saying this, I showed Kasha the mark on the back of my right hand. I wanted to get stronger so that I could prevent the tragedy that struck my village while also potentially saving any of the survivors that are still left. I finished. What happened to your village? Kasha asked. Demons attacked it and either killed or captured anyone they found. I was lucky enough to get away. I answered bitterly. Kasha was silent as she examined me, and I couldn't tell what she might be thinking through those golden eyes of hers. Nero, would it be all right if I read your mind to get a better picture of everything? Kasha asked gently, which slightly surprised me. But after mulling it over in my mind, I thought it would be best to let her. It would be easier to not have to explain everything that happened and reopen those still raw wounds that were my memories. Giving Kasha a nod, I said, "Go ahead." The demigoddess walked over to me and put a finger to my forehead. For a moment, I felt this strange foreign presence in my mind that, while not painful, felt slightly odd and uncomfortable. Soon after that, the presence retreated and Kasha took her finger off my forehead. When I looked up to meet her gaze, I saw tears falling from her eyes as her arms quickly pulled me into a hug that I was completely unprepared for. I wasn't sure about what to do as my arms hung at my sides. But after a few moments, I decided to slowly return the gesture. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you, Nero," Kasha said softly in sympathy, "but I'm also so thankful that I was able to see and hear my mom again after so long through your memories." "Thank you, Nero." "Why, you're welcome," I answered awkwardly. Eventually, though, we separated and I saw Kasha's once round pupils slowly stretch into slits. "We're going to take your village back today. Save those that we can and avenge those that we can't." As those words left her lips, I felt all my hope completely restored. I might be able to see Aletta and Grandpa again. Please, just let them be alive. "Suki, gather as many kitsune as we can afford to remove from this place and have them gather in front of the palace. I want us ready to move out in 10 minutes. Kasha ordered. Suki quickly bowed, "As you wish, Your Highness." Then, the red kitsune took off running, joined by a green and brown furred pair of kitsune with 3 tails. Following this rush of activity, the blonde demigoddess cast a spell that caused some weird portal, like a window, to appear in front of her. Within this window, I saw my village like we were a bird in the sky. The window then moved closer to the village and I saw that it had new walls of wood and stone surrounding it, something which our village never had due to the time, effort, and cost it would take to build and maintain those walls. What didn't make sense was what I saw at the front gates of the village. There were 2 human guards who stood blocking the entrance, yet within the village proper, I could see demons and monsters coming in and out of a few buildings that looked way too small to hold the number of creatures entering and leaving them. "The people at the front gate are likely disguised demons or doppelgangers," Kasha said, answering my unspoken question. "It's pretty suspicious with how many demons are fitting into a few of those houses. I wonder." Kasha trailed off in thought as the window shifted its vision to be within a house. That was when we all got a good view of a tunnel that had been dug down in the center of the house which trailed to some area underground. The walls of this tunnel were lit with torches embedded into the earth and stone that had been carved out. From here, the window went to the bottom of this tunnel where I saw with horror what happened to some of my friends and neighbors. Some were being horrifically tortured as demons, some of which were imps, were in the process of having their flesh skinned, leaving them as screaming naked figures of bleeding muscle who were then taken by other demons and healed of their missing flesh. Then, they'd be sent back to the skinning demons once more to have more of their flesh harvested. I could see the growing piles of human skin that more demons would haul away to be processed for God's knows what. We were witnessing horrific suffering that worked at peak efficiency. Cruel and sadistically peak efficiency. I felt my right hand curl into a fist that trembled in rage as I saw my friend Keys crying and screaming as he went through the process. And this was just a small amount of the villagers. While I did see new faces among the tortured crowd, many faces I might have expected were all missing, especially Aletta and Grandpa. While some villagers had likely died, that didn't explain what happened to the others. So, where was everyone else? Fucking monsters. Kasha growled out as her eyes glowed with rage while her teeth slowly elongated into sharp fangs. Gone was any form of kindness in the demigoddess, and in its place was fury. None of them are going to live for another day on this world, I won't permit it. As Kasha said this, I saw that her anger was shared with the other kitsune around her. Even Yamato, normally completely stoic, showed emotion as his fur bristled in rage. Kasha managed to control her anger for a moment as she looked at me while the conjured window faded away. Nero, you'll have to wait here while we head to the village and kill these sick fucks. I was shocked as she said this. She wanted me to just sit back and do nothing? No, you can't do that. I need to be there, I stated. Kasha just shook her head to me in reply, it's too dangerous, and from what I saw of your memories, you're inexperienced in fighting. If something were to happen, you wouldn't be able to defend yourself. Shaking my head, I argued back, this is my home. I have to try and see this through to the end. You have done admirably so far. It's time for you to take a rest and let someone else take care of this, she said in an effort to placate me, but I tried to hold firm against her. I can't rest. Not until I've got a letter and Grandpa back. This time, I shouted back against her. Just when Kasha looked like she was about to say something, Yamato, surprisingly, spoke up. I will keep watch over him, Princess Kasha. He is my charge. No harm will come to him under my watch if he is brought along. My heart was pounding as Yamato stood up for me against the daughter of his goddess. Looking from the grey kitsune to Kasha, I saw her think for a moment before she seemed to relent with a sigh. You better be right about that. Otherwise, it's your ass. Got it? Kasha demanded to Yamato, who gave a solemn nod. I understand. Thank you, Your Highness. Yamato responded in gratitude. With a nod, Kasha then looked back to me. Ground rule of tagging along is that you follow and obey everything that your guardian says. If he tells you to jump, the only words coming from your mouth will be how high? Got it? I felt relieved to hear this since it meant that I wasn't being left behind. So, do what I've already been doing with Yamato. Got it? I replied with a barely hidden smirk. Kasha's eyes narrowed in amusement at my answer. Cheeky. Kasha remarked before her expression hardened once more, let's head off to meet everyone outside. I'm impatient enough as it is at the moment. Saying this, the blonde demigoddess began marching towards the front courtyard of the palace while her boots ominously clicked against the floor as her ponytail swayed behind her and her tails aggressively snaked around air. They looked like they were trying to strangle or crush some imaginary enemy, and I had absolutely no sympathy or mercy for the monsters she planned to take this aggression out on. Thanks for helping me out, Yamato, I said gratefully to the grey kitsune. I consider the extermination ahead to be a learning experience for you. There, you will see how battles of a higher level are fought. The stoic kitsune answered before adding, but, you are welcome, Nero. Don't worry, kid. Aside from Yamato, I'll also make sure to watch your back during this fight, Karin said with a pat to my back. Karin, I already am watching him. Why must you involve yourself when your presence isn't actually needed? Yamato asked with annoyance. Because it gets under your fur, Grumpy. Two of Karin's blue tails poked Yamato in the side as she said this, eliciting an annoyed grunt from the fox. Do not get in our way. Yamato warned, as he followed after Kasha. Karin and I looked at each other after this. See what I mean? He barely does anything to try and prove the nickname I gave him is wrong. Karin remarked, but we shouldn't tarry any longer, else we're liable to get left behind. I gave the blue kitsune a nod and we both hurried to catch up to Yamato, who walked next to Kasha as they descended for the top of the steps that led down to the courtyard. I thought that it would be a few minutes before the kitsune were all gathered together after Kasha's order. Color me surprised when a veritable army of kitsune packed the courtyard below with any excess spilling out onto the bridge as well. It looked like there were hundreds at this point. How was it even possible for an army like this to exist by the borders of two nations and not be noticed? How are there this many kitsune already assembled? It's only been a few minutes. I asked my internal thought aloud. Well, kid, that's because we all love the princess like we do her mother. Karin explained while gazing at said demigoddess with a look of adoration. If she calls for our help, then we'll bust our asses to aid her. As I watched Kasha reach the bottom of the stairs, I saw how reverent the kitsune acted around her, bowing or making way for her to walk through the crowd. Then, Karin gave a conspiratorial glance and smirk before leaning down to me and whispering, "But between you and me, quite a few of the princess's handmaidens really like her, if you know what I mean. I've heard and smelled enough to know whose name they like to shout on their lonely nights." It was very easy to insinuate exactly what the blue kitsune meant by that statement. I gave Karin a slightly disgusted look at the amount of information that she just gave me. I definitely didn't need to know that. "And are you also of that part of that group?" I asked. "Nah," Karin replied, "I'm not as interested in the princess as her handmaidens are. Don't get me wrong, the princess is sexy as hell and could possibly convince me to take a tumble with her if asked, but I have different type that I'm interested in." And there she goes, giving me too much information again. "Right," I said as we descended the stairs and soon arrived next to Yamato. "Attention, everyone." Any noise among the crowd of kitsune immediately silenced itself as Kasha spoke. "In a few moments, I'll be creating a gate that opens out to the forest just outside of the village we'll be assaulting. Upon arrival, begin to stealthily encircle the village until I give the signal. Once that occurs, charge the village, kill all the monsters within besides a few to question, and save the humans." And as one, every kitsune shouted, "Yes, Princess Kasha." Even Karin and Yamato joined the crowd's shout. Then, a large black portal appeared next to Kasha and every kitsune besides Karin and Yamato charged into it. While that happened, the three of us made our way over to the demigoddess, who gave me a glance before snapping her fingers. A second later, and I found myself wearing actual clothing instead of a pair of torn-up trousers. It looked quite valuable with a fine dark red shirt under chainmail that was covered by a coat of blue leather armor. This was shared with the trousers and boots I wore, which were black with blue armored leather at strategic positions. And conveniently, there was a scabbard hanging from my waist that I was able to put my sword into. "Can't let you enter into a battle half naked," Kasha explained. "Now, let's follow along, shall we?" When Kasha said this, she entered the portal and Karin, Yamato, and I followed after her. Upon stepping through, I got a sudden case of vertigo as we exited into a wooded area, one I was extremely familiar with considering that I ran through it 9 days prior. But after a moment to reorient myself, I looked around to see kitsune quickly scattering off into different directions ahead of us. Further past the trees, I could see the walled village ahead that hid the horrific acts within. Glancing over to Kasha, I saw her raise a hand in the air, pointing at the village, followed by a blue runic circle that let off a pulse of power. This was soon repeated as another spell went off with a pulse of power. "What was that?" I asked. "A pair of spells to prevent any of these little bastards from trying to teleport away or warn their friends," the demigoddess replied as she walked forwards and we followed. My heart was pounding as we drew closer to the edge of the forest and my thoughts went back to that day when I ran. This time, I wasn't running. I came back and brought help. I was going to see you soon, a letter and Grandpa, and I was going to hug you both and apologize for leaving you. Please, just hold on a little bit longer." As my mind was racked with thoughts and worries, I felt a hand on my left shoulder and looked to see Karin's hand. "You okay, kid?" "Just worried," I admitted. "Well, you shouldn't, kid. All of us will go in, kill the bad guys, and save your friends and family. Just stick with Yami and I, and it'll be smooth sailing from here," Karin said confidently with a wide grin. That managed to cheer me up a bit and I smiled back. "Cease your useless worrying, Nero. A warrior remains focused on the battle at hand and tunes out such things," Yamato stated, his gaze focused ahead on the village. Translating Yami speak, "He's trying to tell you that things will be fine," Karin explained, and Yamato didn't seem to react to the verbal jab. That made me smile even wider. Thanks, you too. No problem, Nero. Karin replied warmly. Soon after, we followed Kasha out into the open and watched as she raised her hand in the air and conjured a blue spell circle. What came out was unexpected as I heard a roar of flames as a giant blast of blue fire shot high into the air. This was next followed by a mass chorus of howling as the army of Kitsune charged upon the village as one. It was eerily horrifying to think of what this would look like for a village of humans if an army of foxes charged them at once instead of the village of monsters it was now. At the front gate, I saw the two guards start shifting their shape as what looked like bladed claws grew from their hands, yet that did little to stop the grouping of foxes that quickly piled onto them at once, tearing them apart with claws, teeth, and tails until the monsters were nothing but chunks of flesh on the ground. I felt Yamato wrap his tail around my waist before picking me up and depositing me upon his back. Then, we took off towards the village in a charge as Karin and Kasha followed. Well, Karin followed up by running, which I found impressive considering the weird sandals that she wore. Kasha, on the other hand, just seemed to be behind us for one moment, then she seemed to just blink into existence near the front gate of the village the next moment before entering inside. Already, as we drew closer, I could hear the screams and roars of inhuman creatures coming from within the village while more and more kitsune piled inside either by jumping the walls or running through the open gate. When we arrived at the gates and went inside, I could see the bloodbath that occurred as the bodies of numerous demons and monsters were torn apart by the tide of foxes. In a way, these kitsune reminded me of what I've seen ants do to other insects. A few ants would bite down on the limbs of another insect, then slowly rip the trapped bug apart by its limbs as more ants would start biting chunks out of the immobilized prey. The only difference with this was that it was a group of foxes doing the same to a demon. A surviving demon, one that looked like an imp if only the size of a small child and with purple skin, even tried charging us until Yamato's tail skewered it before throwing the body into the side of a ruined house. The three of us moved past all the demons being butchered and followed Kasha up ahead as she went into one of the houses, and we quickly followed after while avoiding any of the demons that put up slightly more fight than their brethren before being taken down. Upon entering the house which had once belonged to the toymaker Sarah, we all saw the tunnel going down into the earth along with Kasha's form that traveled downwards. In a few moments, the three of us quickly arrived at the bottom of the tunnel which opened up into the room that we saw in that magical window from earlier. It was so much worse being down here and seeing it with my own eyes than through a spell. The sickening coppery smell of blood and death permeated the room. Crude prison cells had been built into the walls with metal bars facing out to what had once been consistent and endless torture. Thankfully, the former prisoners were being led out of these cells by some of the kitsune in the room. And there were so many kitsune were in this room, either ripping apart the demons in the area or continuing to aid any one of the many different traumatized people. All the while, I saw Kasha moving from person to person and talking to each one before casting spells upon them. Some of these spells would heal those that they were cast upon, restoring missing limbs, missing skin, and whatever else that I couldn't see. Other spells didn't seem to perform any visible healing, but whoever they were cast upon seemed to lose that expression of traumatized horror. Of these people in line for Kasha to heal, one of these people was my friend Keys. I quickly hopped off of Yamato and ran over to my friend who I noticed now had many visible streaks of white going through his once fully dark hair. I almost slid over to him as I got to my knees. "Keys," I said, causing one of my two best friends to slowly look over to me. "Nero?" Keys asked cautiously as his hands reached out and grabbed my shoulders, almost as if trying to confirm that I was real. "Yeah, Kai. It's me. I'm right here." When I answered this, Keys' face twisted into one of grief as he started crying. Those monsters ate my parents. They ate our August in front of us. I thought they ate you as well. I pulled my friend into an embrace as he sobbed into my shoulder while tears streamed down my face at hearing of how my other best friend had died before help could come. "They killed my mom as well. Grandpa had me leave him and a letter and run away into the woods. But I came back with help. I just wish that I had been faster. Keys held back his sobbing with effort before he said, I saw why your grandpa and sister here on the first day. Then, the demons took them away. We don't know where they take you, but why you don't come back when you are. He then shakily pointed down to an ominous torch-lit hallway that went off of this skinning room. Even now, I could see a few kitsune examining the piles of skin with visible disgust that I shared. The pile was high and it made me wonder how many times everyone in here had gone through the skinning process. But looking down that hallway, my heart beat fast in my chest as I could barely imagine what further nightmarish tortures that my family may have gone through. Don't worry, Kai. You're gonna be safe. I brought a goddess named Kasha to save everyone, so she and her foxes are gonna take care of all of you. Even though Kasha's a demigoddess, I felt that it was better to just call her a goddess so that my friend would feel safer. Additionally, Inori said that she was a fledgling goddess, so Kasha would likely lose the demi status soon if she hadn't already. Ah, really? He asked with both hope and amazement as he slowly began gazing at the blonde demigoddess continuing to work. Really, Kai? I answered him while resting my hands on his shoulders. Will you be okay if I leave you be for now? I have to find a letter and Grandpa. Keys was hesitant at first before he nodded his head. Go find your family. I'll be okay, Nia, he said with as brave a front as he could put up with his nickname for me. Giving a reassuring squeeze to his shoulders, I stood up and turned to Yamato and Karin. Let's hurry, I said while wiping my eyes. The two kitsune were silent as they gave me nods and we hurried out of the room and down the hallway that Keys pointed out to us. When we arrived to this new room, I found it to be a lot different than the skinning room. More horrifying as blood-curdling screams echoed from the cells containing prisoners that looked so much worse than the skinning room prior. This room consisted of a long and wide hallway that had cells on both sides which spanned the length of the hallway. Approaching one of these cells, I saw a piece of parchment clipped against a wooden board which was plastered to the dividing wall next to the cell door. It was written in some foreign language that I couldn't understand. But that was absolutely minor compared to what I saw inside of the cell. Within was the barely recognizable form of old Henrik that had been horrifically altered. He looked like some horrific amalgam of human and insect as multiple deformities seemed to have just torn out of his skin. His face had a bulbous left eye that seemed ready to pop out of his head that seemed to be filled with multiple copies of his once human brown eye. The right side of his jaw had broken off from the rest of his mouth and face as a large mandible covered in green chitin that sporadically twitched. The rest of his mouth didn't seem much better as his skin stretched, almost to the point of tearing, in an effort to try and cover the deformity. Further down his body were patches of chitin tearing out from flesh. His left arm split at the elbow into a human hand and an insectoid leg, and that was a cleaner mutation compared to what happened to his right arm. It seemed divided in half, but still connected together at his shoulder and wrist as a human arm and insectoid limb. This mutation had forcibly ripped his arm apart, causing his flesh to fester and bleed a thick and soupy green liquid which oozed to the floor. From his back, a twisted flap of flesh grew to a facsimile of a wing that also bled more of that green liquid. A bulbous green insect thorax mutated the bottom of his waist and forced the hip of his right leg to be moved further down the deformity by foot, while his other leg remained the same, but had now become fully insectoid. Even now, I could see slow growths of more chitinous plates slowly trying to poke their way out of his skin, making it bleed as it happened. Grotesquely, I watched all of old Henrik's many eyes shift to look in my direction as the human half of his mouth choked out words while the mandible curled and uncurled.
NRO-ISTHATYOU?
Old Henrik asked with a voice that warbled between human and inhuman tones and needed visible effort for the mutated man to even speak. It is, old Henrik. Don't worry, we're gonna get you out of this cell and fix you. HOWDOYOUFIXT TIR ed. YNTTODIE. It was hard to watch the cranky old man that had chased me and my friends over the years look so defeated and broken. I could just tell that every moment he lived like this was just agony for him. There's a goddess here who has magic. She's going to fix you after she's fixed everyone else. Just hold out a little bit longer. Please. I begged the man whose many eyes searched mine for a few moments until old Henrik finally relented with a nod, the act of speaking now being too much effort for him. Yet, if this is what happened to old Henrik, what happened to my family? Moving away from old Henrik's cell, Yamato spoke to me in a low voice, curse of the insect. Meant to debilitate a target by changing them into an insect. But I have never seen it applied like this before. By the gods, what kind of sick being would create a spell or curse like this? At the next cell, I found the town smith, Odrik, except he looked completely feral. His body seemed to gain constant tumorous growths that grew across his body. At the same time, his arms looked more like bulbous clubs of flesh and bone that his fingers grew out from at disgusting angles. When he saw me, whatever rage that he had been directing towards the stone wall of his cell was now focused all upon me. Odrik charged the bars of his cell with a primal roar and began punching the metal gate, uncaring of his club-like arms being damaged and broken, as his only thought in mind was to see me bashed apart under his blows. I watched as his limbs crunched and his bones starting poking out from his arms at different angles, but that did nothing to slow his attacks as the flesh and bones of his arms was grown over by more flesh and bones to replace them. It all grew imperfectly as the broken fingers were pushed aside so that more fingers could grow in their place. I backed away from the cell while looking at the once kindly man in sorrow. He didn't deserve something like this happening to him. Knowing that he probably wouldn't be able to understand or communicate with me in his cursed state of mind, I stepped away from his cell and moved on to the next, where I saw a twisted and amalgamated creature of multiple limbs, 2 heads, and a horrid fusion of torsos. Like Odrik before, this thing was constantly growing flesh and tumors, but unlike him, its flesh sloughed off its body as it rotted. Before I could say anything, both of the creature's heads looked up at me together, and something about their constantly shifting and rotting features seemed familiar. Nero/Big Brother, is that you? I froze on the spot as I looked at the creature in horror as it spoke with the voices of Aletta and Grandpa. My heart was thumping as I gazed upon this twisted and wretched form that I was able to start picking out the recognizable features from. Aletta's blue eyes and platinum blonde hair, which grew and fell off in clumps from the smaller head grafted to the creature's shoulder. Grandpa's bronze eyes and mouth, both twisted into a mixture of agony and relief. The amalgamated form stood on 4 legs, 2 larger legs that were slightly crouched in the front, while 2 shorter legs supported it from the back. Grandpa's right shoulder was raised up as Aletta's smaller shoulder joined it. Yet Grandpa's was the only arm that came from that shoulder. Instead, Aletta's arms stuck out from the side of their joined ribcages, hanging like a vestigial limb. Their left shoulders didn't share this merging, and Aletta's and Grandpa's arms remained mostly separate whenever their rotting flesh didn't get caught onto new growth that merged the arms together once more. Then Aletta's ear fell off her head and onto the ground. That was when I emptied my stomach contents onto the floor. Big Brother, you came /back. You got away. Why did you come back? Their voices asked together, sometimes one voice overpowering the other. I was crying as I ran to the cell bars as the amalgamated form of Grandpa and Aletta hobbled over. I came back to rescue you. I should have been here sooner, I sobbed out. You ran because I told you to, Nero/Big Brother. Grandpa's voice said primarily as both his and Aletta's arms stuck through the cell bars and cupped my face. They did things to us. It really hurts. I don't want to hurt/live anymore. We can fix you. You'll be better, and then it will all be normal again. I choked out to them as I reached through the bars to hold them, regardless of the ever-changing flesh I felt. We are happy that we got to see you again, they said before both of their heads began heaving out blood and flesh while their hands on my face slipped away. I watched in horror as their amalgamated body began convulsing against the cell bars as they fell against it. No. 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 What's happening? I shouted as I watched my family continue dying in front of me, unable to do anything to help them. Just like Mom. Yamato wrapped his tails against the cell door and ripped it off its hinges. Then I ran inside and slid to my knees as I cradled their body in my arms. Their bodies were joined together in a monstrous manner. Likely by allowing their curse of growth to merge the pair after being surgically cut open and held together until their bodies fused. It was likely that their torturers were using constant applications of healing magic to keep them alive. Since they are all dead. As Yamato trailed off, I quickly picked up on what he meant. Please, get Kasha or someone else who knows healing magic to help them. I don't want to lose any more of my family. As I said this, I watched their eyes rolling around in their sockets as this seizure continued, making them convulse and spit out blood. After what felt like agonizing minutes or hours watching Aletta and Grandpa dying, I felt a presence by my side and a hand on my shoulder. Looking away from them, I found my gaze met by Kasha's slitted golden. Please, I begged, help them. She looked down at the pair and then back to me. As they are currently, I'm not going to heal them. I looked at her in disbelief as I felt completely betrayed by her. Why? Because I fear that if I did heal them, it would continue with them remaining fused like they are. I'm going to let them die. No. No. Once dead, I'll separate them apart and resurrect them since it will less likely result in possible issues. My heart rate plummeted in relief as she said this. They were going to be saved. Aletta and Grandpa would be fixed. But I was soon taken out of that thought when their seizure increased in severity. There has to be something that can stop this. They're in so much pain, but they don't even seem close to dying. I'd reckon that their moment of dying is going to be prolonged for a while due to the constant regeneration. Kasha remarked as both of them began screaming in agony together. Her golden eyes then flitted behind me. Karin, why don't you take Nero aside for a bit? That was when I felt a pair of hands lift me up and begin pulling me away from Grandpa and Aletta's screaming form. What are you doing? Let me go, I shouted as I was pulled to the edge of the cell. I tried to fight Karin's grip, but she was just too strong to pull away from. Suddenly, I was turned around to meet Karin's sympathetic blue eyes before she pulled me into an embrace and held me head in place facing the wall. You don't want to watch this, kid. Just close your eyes, she said gently into my ear. I wanted to fight her on this, but I knew the effort would be completely futile. So, I squeezed my eyes shut and listened to my family continue screaming together. Thump. Thump. The screaming was suddenly cut off, and the cell we all stood in was left completely silent until it wasn't. Squelch. Rip. Crack. Rip. I heard those horrific sounds continue on and I couldn't even imagine what must be happening right now to Grandpa and Aletta. I found myself wrapping my arms around Karin and squeezing as each noise brought more thoughts of their twisted form being mutilated. Of them being permanently gone, just like Mom. It's going to be okay, Nero. Just focus on my voice, alright? You'll have done well getting this far to rescue your family, so just endure for a little longer and you'll be able to see them again very soon, Karin said to soothe me. I tried to follow her advice and concentrate on her words instead of the nightmarish sounds behind me. It was hard, but I tried my best. Mercifully, the noise finally ended and bright light seeped through my closed eyelids until it faded. That was when Karin's grip on my finally loosened. You can open your eyes now, Karin whispered to me. As my eyes slowly opened, my ears were filled with a beautiful sound I thought I might not hear again. Big brother. I broke away from Karin's embrace and turned to see Aletta and Grandpa sitting on the floor, now thankfully separated from one another and completely healed as neither of them were afflicted by that constant growth and rot of their bodies. Both were also clothed in simple white shirts and trousers. Rushing over, I pulled Aletta into a tight hug and whispered a string of repeated apologies to her. "I'm sorry, Aletta. I left you like a coward when I should have been there to protect you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You came back, big brother." Aletta interrupted. "You came with help and saved us from so much pain. Thank you." I felt her arms wrap around and hold me as I felt blessed that she didn't hate me. Then, I felt another pair of arms wrap around Aletta and me, which made me look to see Grandpa smiling at me with tears in his eyes. "You did nothing wrong, Nero. If there's anyone that should be apologizing, it should be me for making you run. I'm sorry for doing that to you. It doesn't matter, Grandpa. We're together again," I said with a joyous smile. Then, I felt a hand rubbing my head. When I looked to where it came from, I saw the bringer of my miracle. Kasha had a simple smile on her face that not even the bits of blood splatter on her cheek or forehead managed to detract from. Even her eyes, once a molten gold, had taken on the color of a setting sun. "You're a good kid, Nero. You might disagree, but because of you, so many innocent men, women, and children won't have to suffer any longer. Take a rest and enjoy the time with your family. You've earned it." With that, Kasha stood up and began walking away. That was when I noticed that a few of her tails were just painted in blood. I did my best to ignore it and focus back on what I currently had. Grandpa and Aletta were finally safe. Sometime later, Kasha. It had taken a long while to work my way through all the victims trapped within this village-turned-torture chamber. And going through them and their memories, I found that a good group of them were not even from this village. They were from a city miles away in the Baharuth Empire called Fielwold. Some were in high positions within the city guard, established merchants, wealthy landowners. It was spread out among so many different positions within the city, but all of them had the similarity of being in a position of power. In addition to them, quite a few of their family members had also been brought here over the course of multiple days. At first, they were all tortured for information pertaining to the city and nation. But after they had given everything they had, the sick monsters continued to put them through unneeded agony before sending them to either the skinning room or the testing cells. And by God, those testing cells were sick and horrific. Each cell contained people afflicted by different curses that went through the gamut of altering their bodies, their minds, or even both. Nero's family, for instance, was forcibly fused to one another with their ever-growing and rotting bodies healing into each other after being mutilated. An innocent little girl and a kindly old man were subjected to a fate worse than death and had been forcibly kept alive to experiment upon. Like I had told Nero, I didn't want to find out what might happen if my healing considered their conjoined form as the default, so I had to temporarily put them out of their misery before ripping their bodies and limbs apart from one another and separating the pieces into two separate piles. I fucking hated doing that since it felt so horrible to have to break those innocent people into pieces to fix them. It was a good thing I had Karin not allow him to watch. He didn't need those images in his head when he'd already seen and been through enough. I was extremely appreciative of how Karin comforted Nero and tried to keep his attention away from the horrid work I had to do. Internally, I was screaming and crying as my tails cut, ripped, and broke them. Externally, I tried to maintain my composure and act like I had everything under control, especially for Nero's sake considering how close to snapping he was. After everything he'd gone through, Nero didn't need the person he was looking at for a miracle to break down. Once I had finished with the disgusting work, I cast True Resurrection on the pair and gained some measure of peace as they came back restored as they should have been. After that, I watched with relief and satisfaction as Nero, Aletta, and Ursra reunited as a family once more. Seeing that one happy moment in the face of all the horrid shit I saw helped to lessen that strain on my mind. Really, by the end of today, I just wanted to curl up with Lucrute and have someone to talk to about everything. Between living back on Earth, and from what I had seen before in the New World, this was so much worse. This was absolute horrific cruelty of the worst kind. They harvested the flesh of the people I freed in a way as to cause them the greatest amount of pain. These monsters chopped off their limbs for food. And none of these victims were able to die, since they'd just be healed of all their injuries before being sent back through the torturous process all over again. And this was just those that had to suffer this repeated skinning. There were also the people who had been experimented upon in the next room of this hellhole. Each one had been inflicted with a multitude of curses for unknown reasons, but it was obvious to see that the experimentation was made as agonizing as possible. I was thankful that quite a few of these people were easily fixed by dispelling their curses. Others, like Nero's family, took more drastic methods to fix, since even with their curses dispelled, it didn't undo the alterations that they had gone through. I had to see it like fixing a computer. It was just like turning it off and on again to fix a major issue. It worked. That's all that mattered. I despised the evils wrought here from the essence of my being, because they managed to industrialize torture in a way that I never thought possible. And after finishing most of the work needed to fix everyone here, I made a promise to myself. Whoever or whatever had organized and commanded these monsters to do this was going to die. I would fucking butcher them like they did to the people here. All of this led to where I was now, standing within a cell that had once contained a young girl named Iara, who had been placed under the curse of frostbite, which continually assaulted her with cold damage that was only prevented from killing her by the healing she received from her torturers. That, or they would throw an enchanted hunk of metal that was as hot as an open fire into her cell, which would keep her warm if she kept her body in physical contact against it. She had burns of both heat and cold spread across her body, while her limbs had turned black from frostbite. At least she didn't need to suffer from that any longer. Now, the only person in this cell aside from me was a fat demon in a heavily bloodied surgical uniform, most of it from his own wounds. A beaked black mask of unknown leather covered his face like a plague doctor's. All 4 of his limbs had been chewed or torn off, followed by a painful cauterization. Before, he had been a torturer who seemed to be one of the people in charge of the activities here. Now, he was at my mercy. Funny enough, the moment I walked into the cell, the fat little fuck tried to squirm away from me, almost like he knew exactly who I was. Why are you trying to move away from me? Are you so afraid of me after everything you've done? I asked while taking the time to walk towards the demon at a torturously slow pace. You defeated my master's creator. Why wouldn't I know you? I just don't understand why you are here, stopping the happiness that I'm spreading to others. I could feel my eye twitching as the fat demon said this. I don't know what he meant by his master's creator being defeated by me, but I could get what he meant by happiness. Happiness? I asked in an effort to confirm. Yes, happiness. Giving happiness is my purpose and goal. If I remove an arm from one person, then those without arms would be made so much happier knowing that they still had theirs. In turn, if I remove another person's leg, then the person without an arm would be made happy as well. Can't you understand, Cassia Blanc? My breathing sped up as I launched a tail out and wrapped it around the fat fuck's neck before pulling him towards me. Happiness? Happiness? I wasn't going to listen to him talk any longer. I'd just rip what I needed from his head and end him afterwards. Putting my hand against his head, I dug through his mind for everything I wanted. For once, I found some slight resistance to my mental intrusion, but it was barely a hindrance as I continued my investigation until I reached what I was after. The one who ordered this was a demon called Demiurge. And no, 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 no. I found myself screaming in absolute fury, horror, betrayal, and so many other emotions as my tails slammed the fat demon into the ground before they started stabbing him over and over. At a certain point, the former creature, whose name didn't even deserve to pass through my lips, was nothing more than paste on the ground as my tails continued stabbing over and over into the ground. I didn't stop as I took out all my immediate emotional rage into that one area for what felt like minutes. By the time I was finished, I was heavily breathing and the fat fuck's pasted body was draining into the massive hole that I had made. Then, I cast, message. Momonga. Meet me at the lake. Now. Following my screaming, I immediately teleported to the lake that we had once had fun fishing at. Looking out at the lake, my mind was a whirlwind of emotion. The demon demiurge, the monster who ordered all of this, was part of Nazarick. He was one of Momonga's. He was fucking Momonga's, and from what the fat fuck's thoughts told me, they were all under the belief that Momonga ordered this. That he ordered all of these people butchered and tortured. Then I smelt the stench of death and I had to do everything I could to not turn around to the fucking skeleton and start screaming. Kasha. What's wrong? And why are you covered in blood? Momonga asked worriedly from behind me. Momonga, where is Demiurge right now? I responded in a growl. What does Demiurge have to do with anything? What happened? Why are you even interested in him? The Lich asked as he walked closer to me. Momonga. Where the fuck is Demiurge? Right now? I asked once more, finding it harder and harder to keep my tone level. He should currently be in Nazarick at the moment. I had just talked to him a few moments ago. The Lich answered. Remember a little while back when I asked if you were keeping track of where your people were going and what they were doing? You told me that it was all under your control and that things were fine. Yes, I remember this. I've still been receiving reports that my subordinates have been maintaining a low profile and avoiding conflicts with any of the land's natives unless no other option was available, he said cautiously. Did something happen? Oh, your subordinates have maintained a low profile. So low, in fact, that no one noticed when a village in the Baharuth Empire was assaulted by demons. The inhabitants of this village were then put through numerous horrific tortures and experimentations, all of which I got a real good fucking look at. And all of this was ordered by a sadistic bastard named Demiurge, who was under the belief that it was ordered by you. But that should be impossible, as I know that my friend wouldn't order something like this. I finally turned to look at Momonga, now appearing before me as a lich in his black and purple hooded robes. My eyes meeting the glowing red dots in his skull's eye sockets. So, like I asked before, where the fuck is Demiurge? I asked. Kasha, what would you do if you knew of where he currently was? Momonga asked slowly. I'd go meet him. Have a nice chat with him as I ripped him apart and vaporized what still remained after I was done. You know, a nice chat. I explained while walking over to the skeleton and stopping a foot away from him, maintaining my gaze the entire time. Momonga put his skeletal hands on my shoulders. Kasha, I know that you're angry right now. Angry? I interrupted. Angry is something that we're far past at this point. Angry is how I feel when dealing with the 8 fingers. Angry is unable to even slightly describe an iota of what I'm feeling right now. And it's why you need to take a moment to calm down and cool your head. Momonga reasoned. I'll cool my head when I have demiurges impaled on my tail. I can't allow that. My eyes narrowed at this. And why can't you allow it? Why can't I kill an evil and monstrous demon like him? Why can't I make sure that he'll never touch another innocent soul again? Why, Momonga? My tails repeatedly smacked the earth behind me with thunderous booms as I used them as an outlet for my wrath, because Demiurge is the creation of one of my friends. Albert painstakingly crafted Demiurge as he is, and I can't allow one of the few remnants of my friends to be destroyed. I see him, along every other NPC within Nazarick, as my friend's children and I can't lose them, Momonga shouted back, his form being outlined in green from his curse. You see them as children? Then why aren't you acting as the responsible adult and keeping your children in line? Some parents have issues with their child becoming a criminal. You have the issue of your child creating an industrial-scale method of horrific suffering, I demanded while poking Momonga in his ribcage to put emphasis into this. It's difficult for me to want to change aspects about them when it could lead to them either breaking or becoming utterly different than the vision my friends had for them, he said back, making me growl. This isn't a game, Momonga, I shouted in frustration. This is a real world, with real consequences. Every act of suffering, every death inflicted by your NPCs is happening to real people who have lives beyond just yours and mine. In our prior talks, you agreed that our original world was a hellhole, that this world seemed so much better and could be made better. I spread out my arms and tails to show off all the blood still on my body and coating the fur of my tails. This isn't better. This is fucking worse. At least back home, the people in charge made things shittier because they were greedy. Here, your people are making things worse out of pure malice and sadism. All the while, you do nothing because you're either too chicken shit or too apathetic to care. Gesturing to him and myself, I added, we are too strong for almost all the people of this world. Everything we do has consequences, and the people of this world can do nothing but roll over and take whatever both of us decide to do. We must be better because we are too powerful to treat things like a game. We both know what happens when people with too much power and too little care of their actions are left to run amok on a world. Do you get it, Suzuki? Momonga seemed surprised when I used his actual name and took the moment to look away from me, either in thought or shame. I understand where it is that we stand in this world's hierarchy of power. But this isn't easy for me either, Kasha. You have the easy ability to care about what happens to these people, but I don't. I can't care. At most, I can feel a basic understanding of their situations, otherwise I can't muster a single feeling without monumental effort on my part. His skeletal hands shook my shoulder for emphasis. The strongest and most constant emotional response I can feel is the minute amounts of care and nostalgia I get from seeing my friends' NPCs. A steady wave of green outlined his body as he spoke. Outside of Nazarick, the only other person I can gain some feeling of emotion with is you. That's it. Every day, it's a struggle to feel anything but apathy. Losing a single one of my NPCs is the equivalent of killing off another one of the small, numbed emotions that I still have. Each day, I can feel myself losing more and more of what connected me to Satoru Suzuki. Whenever I look into a mirror, I can't tell if I'm looking at Suzuki, Momonga, or Ain's All-Gown. Do you have any idea how much it rips at my mind to know exactly what I've lost but be unable to replicate it because I know it would be an inferior copy? My rage stalled for a moment as I heard the desperation in my friend's voice. We had talked about our issues with one another, but he had never told me exactly how much it affected him like he did just now. We were both a pair of regular people who had been thrust into a fantastical situation we never would have dreamed of happening. I cared about my friend, but I was lost on what to do. Momo, what exactly would you have me do? Demiurge has fucked up so badly that there is no fixing it with an apology followed by a promise to not do it again. I don't want to hurt you, but my innate sense of justice along with my instinctual mind are both demanding that he dies. If you were in my position right now, after seeing all the hell I just did, what would you do? Momonga's imposing frame seemed to slightly buckle as his shoulders dipped. For a very simple moment, the undead lich seemed extremely human. If I was as emotional as you are, I'd probably kill him. But I'm not. I'm a greedy man who wants to hold on to everything he cares about. So please, I'm begging you, let me deal with him on my own terms and make certain that something like this never happens again. Don't put me into a position where I have to make the choice between you or him. I can't afford to lose anyone close to me. I heard his warning through the plea he gave me. I understood exactly what he meant. It was easy enough to understand what a sentimental person like Momonga would decide. If it came to a decision between any one of his NPCs or me, he'd choose the NPC. He might agonize over the decision, but he'd choose the people he was closest to. Neither of us wanted this fight as we both knew how terrible it would become. I would break his things and he'd break mine. The problem is that my things were a lot more fragile than his. And once he broke all of my things, there would be absolutely nothing holding me back from focusing all of my wrath on Nazarick and him. I have no idea who might survive the conflict, but I know that both of us would come out as losers in the end. Even with the extreme anger still boiling inside me, I tempered it with the knowledge that I had to protect my daughters, my mate, my friends, and anyone else I had taken under my wing. I hated that I cared too much to allow anything to happen to my loved ones, even when I was baying for blood. Fuck you. Fuck you for being my friend and making me care about you, I said in frustration as I thumped his ribcage with my fist. I hated him for preventing me from enacting the proper justice that should be getting dealt to the twisted fuck that is Demiurge. I'm sorry, Momonga said regretfully. No, you're not. Not really. I replied before giving him a hardened glare, but I will tell you now, if I so much as see a hair of his head, I will end him. I might not hunt him, but that won't stop me from acting the moment I see him. And that is only one of my demands. Momonga was quiet for a moment, before he sighed and nodded. That is, understandable, even if I don't particularly enjoy hearing it. But what are your other demands? You are personally going to do an actual audit on your people yourself instead of assuming that what they say is actually what's happening. Because, as we both have found out, that clearly isn't the fucking case, especially because I also know that your people are doing some heinous shit in the Baharuth Empire city called Fieldwold, which needs to be ended. And all of that leads into another concern involving my daughters. This time, the skeleton actually became shocked. Daughters? What do you mean by daughters? We haven't even been here a month for you two. I have wholeheartedly adopted Nina and Tyre as my daughters, and they, in turn, see me as their mother. That leads to the issue days prior where a pair of imps and a doppelganger tried to kidnap my daughter, Tyre, and replace her. You are going to bust your ass and find out if it's your people who were behind it and shut it down. Immediately. Or else, I, as a protective parent, will do everything in my power to shut it down personally. And I will not play around when my family is involved. Do we understand each other? Clearly. Momonga answered, I will handle it. If I find out about any such plots, then I'll make certain that they are ended. But I'll need you to promise to me that you will not fly off the handle if I do discover any plots. This caused me to cock my head at Momonga in confusion. Fly off the handle. Kasha, you are extremely emotional, almost unstably so. While you have people that you want to keep safe, I have those that I want to protect as well, and you going on a killing spree when hearing it goes against this. Can you agree to my request? I wanted to say no. To tell Momonga that if anything was turned up, then I'd fully invest myself in utterly annihilating whatever threatened my family. But I had to hold myself back. Momonga was trying his best to extend to me an olive branch of truce, and I'd be an absolute fool to decline it even if my instincts screamed otherwise. I didn't want to fight because I knew how it would likely play out. And I didn't want to lose my friend. Momonga was likely the only person in this world who could understand me. He was my one tie I currently had to my old life, and I him. I gave him an anchor to his former humanity, just like he allowed me to remember how mortal I once was. I could feel my fangs receding as I found my voice once more. I really don't want to, but because you are my friend, I'm willing to trust you to handle this. Just be aware, I only give second chances once. Momonga gave me a firm nod. I'll make sure not to waste it. He finally let go of my shoulders and turned before walking away until he suddenly stopped and looked out to the lake. I enjoyed fishing here. Hopefully, we can do it again, Pandora's fox. That remark took me off guard as he said it. Then, I gave Momo a soft smile as I realized that, with how socially awkward the man is, this was his attempt to maintain the bridge between us. I hope so as well, King Arthuritis. Then, I watched as he teleported away, leaving me alone once more. Making my way over to the small lake, I began cleaning the blood and gore from my tails. At the same time, I cleaned my face and clothes off. Luckily, the material making up my clothes wasn't stainable as any blood just slid off the silk and only needed a splash of water to wash away any of the harder to remove bits of dried blood and viscera. Even so, it took a while since the blood and gore really tried sticking into my tail's fur. All the while, I contemplated my next course of action. All those people I rescued saw my true form and had already been told that I was a goddess since a few of the people I was healing asked who I was. In response, I just said that I was the fox princess, which gave me a degree of separation from my divine persona. My only hope is that none of them would discover my actual name so that I could still retain my adventurer persona. Luckily, since they all came from the Baharuth, I'd likely barely, if ever, interact with them as Kasha Blanc. They'd just know that the goddess called the Fox Princess saved them, and that would be the end of it. What became a hassle was getting all the people from Fielwold back home. There were over 92 people who had been taken from that city, and about half of them were nobles, wealthy merchants, or family to both. And from what I learned from a few of them, they had found themselves replaced with copies of themselves. This left me with the issue of how I brought them home since, if Momo didn't end whatever it is that was happening there soon, then I'd need to cull the fakes and make sure that it was safe for them to return home. That opened up another can of worms on how I should return them all back. Do I just drop them off at their homes individually or just send all of them back home together in one go with the gate spell? I should also send a contingent of kitsune with them as a precautionary protective measure in addition to the multiple squads I already planned to drop into Fielwold to both scout and take care of any lingering monsters or demons still within the city. It was going to be a logistics nightmare to say the least. But I guess it would be a good idea to drop off the civilians in a public manner since that was likely to increase my worship. I felt a little dirty thinking of the quote that I heard many corporate pricks use before on Earth. Never let a good tragedy go to waste. But that would have to take place after it was safe for all the civilians I rescued to go back home. This was also all in addition to learning that Mom was beginning to establish herself in this world, what with Mom making Nero her paladin. I'd need to figure out what to do to help him, beyond what Yamato and Mom were doing already. There was a lot that I had to do right now. Shit, I was going to be busy tonight. Demiurge. It was worrying when Lord Ines had left the throne room in the middle of a report that Albedo had been giving. I had just finished giving my report of my endeavors with acquiring new sources of scroll-making materials from the farm animals that had been acquired. I had even jested with my lord that both the animals and the chimera I had been creating squealed louder than any swine, and tasted better as well. While the hides the normal animals had harvested were only capable of creating lower quality scrolls of the second tier, the first generation of chimeras that were the cursed animals had been capable of creating scrolls of the third tier. I believe that it likely has something to do with the impact that the curses had on their flesh, making their skin more attuned with magic. This was something that required more research, especially if I could breed these traits with other, stronger, creatures. Though, I did have to wonder if the cursed traits of the chimeras might be possible to pass down through their progeny. I think I would like to see what such a possibility might look like if I were to use my favorite chimera. That chimera did have a female half to it, so the potential for breeding was possible if the rotting curse didn't kill any of its growing spawn, leaving such an experiment a wasted failure. I guess that one could say that I have a special attachment to it considering that it was my first chimera that I had created. I even named it Spot due to the rotted holes of flesh that it generated at times. It made such a wonderful harmonized chorus. Another thought filled my mind on if it were possible to create a self-fertilizing chimera made from a male and female animal grafted together in a specific manner. That would certainly prevent any form of mating rejection, especially if I did so with members of a different species grafted to the original sheep that I had. Sadly, while there had been many breakthroughs with both the chimeras and scroll production, the same could exactly be said about Lord Ines's curse. Oh, there had been multiple discoveries on curses that have been made, but it didn't lead any closer to a method on how to break my lord's specific debilitation. And as I had given my report on everything of note, Albedo had been giving Lord Ines a report on the workings of Nazarick and current activities of interest. It was when Albedo made a remark of a great tree to the north of us in the great forest of Tob that Lord Ines said he had to leave and to wait for his return. I wasn't even able to assign him a squad of bodyguards before he left. Albedo and I had been flawed and greatly concerned by this, but we made sure to follow our Lord's orders. After all, it might be a method of Lord Ines to test our loyalty, which is all according to his masterful plan. Yet, while I was able to remain calm with the method behind our Lord's plan, Albedo wasn't as collected. She looked nervous and worried. Sadly, That is the only time I can actually get a slight read on what might be going through her mind. If it involved her love for Lord Ines, then I could partially guess where her mind was at, but not what she might be planning. Like Lord Ines, she was impossible to get a read on, and that made it difficult to plan around her if the need arises. Even though Albedo is highly competent as Nazaric's overseer and an intellectual peer to myself, I find that she is too ruled by her emotions where Lord Ines is concerned. It can lead to her making mistakes that could hurt our Lord in the long run. What could have Lord Ines's immediate attention? Why did my love not even take one of us along for protection? Albedo asked. I am unsure as to what might have happened. It's why my current theory is that he could possibly be testing our loyalty for his grand plan. That, or I said before Albedo interrupted. He could be trying to protect us. Additionally, it could be something that my love feels only he should be the one to deal with it. Albedo reasoned. My gaze glanced at the staff of Ines' all gown that our Lord had left behind. For him to leave it and not even both trying to change his items, it must be something he feels putting effort into would be a waste. We may only learn of what our Lord may be thinking when he finally returns. Until then, all we can do is wait. I kept to myself the other reason for Lord Ines's swift departure, where he didn't even wait to bring protection with himself. There was a threat that he had discovered and didn't have time to wait for. So, there the pair of us stood together, waiting for Lord Ines's return. Thankfully, our obedience was rewarded as Lord Ines arrived before us. I was relieved that he returned, and a small, niggling doubt in the back of my mind was thankful that he didn't abandon us like the other supreme beings. I saw his crimson gaze turn to me before Lord Ines finally spoke, Demiurge. I gave him a bow in response. Yes, my lord. I just came back from a heated conversation with Cassia Blanc over your actions. Lord Ines answered, making me slightly confused along with mentally processing what this meant. Cassia Blanc, from what my spies have gathered, is a woman who has great love for lesser species like humans. That was in addition to the emotionally volatile nature of hers. If Lord Ines was forced to speak with her, then that could only mean she discovered the Baharuth outpost and reacted strongly to the work being done there. But could that just be it? The area chosen was extremely far from Rantel and would have required her to go out of her way to find. Unless, that was because she had already been searching for it in the first place. That also meant that Cassia was both aware of Nazaric's goals to acquire harvested materials and our research into Lord Ines's condition. And, in prior history about her from my creator, she took out an entire guild by starving them of supplies and power. Additionally, she likely ruined the research on Lord Ines's condition because she actually had a cure to it and didn't wish for us to discover one because she wanted or needed something that only Lord Ines and Nazaric could supply. Something with which she could trade a cure to Lord Ines's condition for. With that in mind, was her attack on the outpost a warning or a declaration of war? I hated that I couldn't predict her actions or intentions. But that didn't mean that she couldn't be led to an end result. She still had those humans that she cared about. And what occurred? Albedo asked with worry. Why did she dare to argue with you, Lord Ines? She discovered that a village in the Baharuth Empire had been converted into a place where humans were being tortured and experimented upon. In addition to this, she learned that the city of Fielwold was also going through, in her words, some heinous shit. Both events had been orchestrated by you, Demiurge. As Lord Ines said this, I fell to a knee and bowed my head. Obviously, he was upset at my failure in hiding the activities of Nazaric. I couldn't help but feel an immense amount of shame at how I had failed Lord Ines like this. Yes, my lord. I give you my deepest apologies at being discovered. That is not why I'm upset. Lord Ines interrupted, completely silencing me. With his angered state, I was likely to be punished or killed. Both endings being completely deserved for how I disappointed him. Demiurge, I had to desperately beg for Cassia to not try to hunt you down and kill you. And even then, while she won't hunt you, she has promised that she will destroy you if you come into her line of sight. He explained, making me realize the severity of the situation. I even heard Albedo's gasp of shock, breaking whatever calm facade she had presented. Lord Ainz had to relinquish his pride in order to belay the kitsune's anger. To do such a thing would be the same as relinquishing the pride all of Nazarick. Never have I been more appreciative of my lord as I was now. And that feeling was completely tarnished by the knowledge of what Lord Ainz had to do to protect me. Even if I hadn't betrayed Nazarick intentionally, I still betrayed it by embarrassing Lord Ainz. My lord, if it is your wish, please punish or kill me for disgracing the name of Ainz ul Gaun, I said, absolutely accepting of my fate. Demiurge. Lord Ainz said with some surprising hesitancy, I'm not going to punish or kill you. Lord Ainz, why wouldn't you enforce harsh punishment on Demiurge for causing you to beg to the kitsune? Albedo asked immediately, a question that I shared with her. Lord Ainz walked to his throne and sat down. Following this, he rested his skull into his hand. He seemed to be in deep thought for a few slow moments. Then, he pulled his skull from his hand and looked at Albedo and I. I couldn't kill any of you unless presented no other choice, such as what happened with Shiltir. You are all the precious remnants of my friends that were entrusted to me as their final gifts. Each of you was lovingly crafted with great care, imperfections included. While others might see monsters, I see all of you as perfect, because that was how you were all made. But while that is how I see you, even I am not blind to the way others would see you or what you are all inclined to. Oh, Lord Ainz. Your heart is truly generous and great to love us regardless of our imperfections, Albedo said, making sure to glance my way as she finished. I had no urge to argue on that. If that's the case, Lord Ainz, then what is it that you plan to do with either Cassia Blanc or myself? I slowly requested. I'll need you to recall all forces that are in the Baharuth Empire that aren't basic scouts with orders to avoid killing the Empire's inhabitants. When Lord Ainz said this, I understood what it was that the Supreme Being truly wanted with that order. He realized that conquering the Baharuth Empire was unfeasible at the current moment due to how close it was to Cassia Blanc. What he'd likely want is for us to turn our gazes to further countries, away from Cassia's attention, and grow Nazarick's power base before returning back to the Baharuth and Riastais. Of course, my lord. I answered obediently. Next, I need to know if there are any plots originating from Nazarick to kidnap either of Cassia's daughters. Yes, my lord. Albedo immediately replied, while the first attempt failed against the elder Veyron's sister, our agents have been biding their time to snatch the younger sister. Lord Ainz made an uncharacteristic groan before sighing. End all of those attempts immediately. Any attempts to do such would both fail and gain us an immediate enemy. Do you understand, Albedo? This made the succubus freeze in place before she slowly nodded. Yes, my lord. She replied. And there, I understood what Lord Ainz meant. Of course, sending such simple agents to kidnap the Veyron's sister, now a confirmed daughter of Cassia Blanc, would fail. They were too weak for such a task. No, it needed a more powerful touch. One such as the might of the combined Pleiades. Albedo and I would need to discuss this later on. Finally, I require detailed reports of all of Nazarick's activities. Up to, and including, those involving humans or sapient inhabitants of this world. Starting with you, Demiurge. Standing up once more and walking closer to Lord Ainz, I nodded. What do you require of me? Let's go over everything that occurred in this village in the Baharuth. Starting with the reasoning for doing so, the methods enacted, and any other information that you might believe could be superfluous. I want to hear it all. With Lord Ainz's insistence of details, I figured out that he likely was trying to piece together how Cassia could have discovered the outpost. I was only too happy to oblige. As you wish, my lord, I said with a small measure of pride. To begin, there was once a village.